Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you are watching first part of What If Naruto and Team 7 accidentally goes to Avatar universe. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Not wasting no more time. Let's start the story.
Earth, fire, air, and water. The Avatar, who was supposed to stabilize the world during times of crisis, was the only one who had the ability to control all four elements. It was long believed that people could control these elements at will. However, the Avatar also disappeared when ninjutsu replaced the previous method of manipulating the elements. Unaware of his role, some people, of course, think that the Avatar is still with us. On the other hand, I think the Avatar will return and restore world stability. A group of villagers were pursuing a 7-year-old boy in a Konoha street. The boy wore the Uzumaki crest on the back of a white skirt with a red flame-like mark on the front and sun-kissed blonde hair. He had 3 whisker lines on each cheek and cerulean blue eyes. Demon and monster were among the derogatory terms used by the pursuing mob as the young Naruto ran as fast as he could. When one of the shinobi threw a kunai at Naruto, an Anbu who was observing from the rooftops was on the verge of stopping the crowd. When the kunai landed right in front of Naruto's foot, he initially believed the shinobi had missed, but then he saw a strange piece of paper attached to it, and his eyes and whiskers began to glow blue. The villagers cheered when the explosive tag exploded, but they stopped when they noticed 6 glowing whisker marks and 2 glowing eyes through the smoke. The explosion's fire abruptly rose like a pillar before spreading out and disappearing, to be replaced by a pillar of air. A kunai was thrown by one of the shinobi, but the strong winds deflected it. A huge piece of earth suddenly rose from the ground, and Naruto sent the rock in the direction of the crowd with a hand motion, crushing a number of people. Naruto then abruptly fell to the ground after a wave of water from a nearby pond knocked the others off their feet. After landing on the ground beside the unconscious boy, the Anbu said, "I need to report this to Hokage-sama." He then picked him up and proceeded to the Hokage Tower. After failing the Ninja Academy 3 times, Naruto has finally graduated, along with his rival Uchiha Sasuke, Teme and his crush Haruno Sakura-chan. He was assigned to cell number 7. Hitaki Kakashi Sensei was their Jonin Sensei, and the 4 of them worked as a team after barely passing his test. Naruto assumed that an Anbu had saved him after he fainted, but he was unaware of the specifics of how he had managed to get away from that mob when he was 7. The team was currently waiting for the Sandaime to assign them their next chore, after finishing yet another dull D-rank mission. To everyone's surprise, Hiruzen declared, "I've decided to give you a C-rank mission since you 3 seem to be handling D-rank missions so easily." Sandaime-sama, you can't really mean that, Amino Iruka Sensei, Naruto's former academy sensei, interrupted Hiruzen. Besides, this mission could prove vital if Naruto is to realize his destiny as the Avatar, Hiruzen thought after saying, "Oh, I believe that they are more than ready, Iruka." Hiruzen had just said, "Your mission will be to escort a group of archaeologists. You may come in now." When 5 archaeologists entered through the door, everyone in the room gasped when Naruto asked, "Are those the Archi? What Sama call it? ISDS?" Sakura exclaimed, "It's called archaeologist," as the person who seemed to be the archaeologists' leader approached Kakashi. "I'm Professor Zay, head of anthropology at the Land of Fire University," said Zay. Hitaki Kakashi turned to face the genin and said, "I'm Hitaki Kakashi, the leader of this cell, and these are my students, Uzumaki Naruto, Uchiha Sasuke, and Haruno Sakura." Before the genin and the archaeology team, with the exception of Zay, left, Kakashi stated, "We'll meet at the south gate in an hour. Return to your homes, and bring anything that you'll need for our trip." Zay said, "So, is that him?" Kakashi stated, "Yes, he's the one, Uzumaki Naruto." Zay nodded in agreement with Hiruzen's statement. "You understand the importance of this mission, don't you?" In actuality, Zay and Hiruzen had known each other since Zay was a young child. 5 hours later, Konoha, south gates with the exception of Kakashi, everyone was at the gates, prepared to depart. It was clear that Sakura and Naruto were becoming annoyed by Kakashi's tardiness. Naruto questioned, "Man, when's he gonna show up?" Everyone started to perspire when Sakura said, "Probably around sunset." Zay questioned, "Is he always this late?" Naruto exclaimed, Yeah, pretty much. Just before Kakashi appeared in a cloud of smoke. You're late. He was greeted by Naruto and Sakura right away. Even though he knew it wouldn't work, Kakashi tried one of his excuses. Sorry for that, but you see, I ran into this old woman who asked for help in carrying her bags. Naruto said, yeah, right. Can we get going now? And they began to move. Forest Road, Land of Fire. After they had left the village, Naruto questioned, so where are we going anyway? The Southern Air Temple. It is said that a people called the Air Nomads once used to live there, Zei replied. The Air Nomads? Wondered Sakura. The Air Nomads are said to have been able to control the air itself, said Zei. Archaeologist Renji said, oh, please. You aren't still going on about that, are you? I'm just terrible at coming up with names, so I'm just going with this. It's not the same Renji from that one filler in the anime. It's true. I found proof that the air nomads could control the air currents, Zei replied. Yeah, and next thing you're gonna tell me is that bisons can fly, Renji replied. The Southern Air Temple, Land of Fire. The three genin gazed in wonder at the air temple as the group approached a cliff with a view of it. Sakura remarked, wow, it's huge. People actually used to live there. Zei remarked, yes, it's hard to believe, isn't it? Before they descended to the temple. Shortly after entering, they discovered a library, where 3 archaeologists remained to read while the other 2 chose to continue their exploration. Since there wasn't much else to do, Sakura decided to read a little. She looked through the bookshelves to find something that would catch her attention, and as she was reading one, a scroll fell out. She picked up the scroll out of curiosity and unfolded it. When the scroll was fully unrolled, she gasped and asked herself, what's this? It looked like a training scroll for a technique known as air bending. Since Kakashi Sensei would likely want to see this scroll, Sakura hurried off to find him. She discovered him gazing at the temple's vista from the wall. As Sakura showed Kakashi Sensei the contents of the scroll, she said, Sensei, look at what I've found. At that moment, Naruto and Zei turned a corner, and the archaeologist's eyes glowed instantly upon seeing the scroll, which he then removed from Sakura's hands. Zei exclaimed, this is an air bending scroll, as Naruto took a few steps away after looking at the contents of the scroll. Air bending? Inquired Sakura. Before they heard something crash into the wall and turned to see a smashed pot with the wall and Naruto standing there with his arms outstretched, Zei said, it's what their air controlling techniques were called. Naruto exclaimed, well, would you look at that? It worked, with a start. Sakura questioned, Naruto, how'd you do that? I don't know. I just thought I'd try it out to see if it worked and I did it, Naruto replied. Zei remarked, wow, you must be descended from the air nomads, right before Renji arrived. Zei-san, there's something that you've got to come and see, Renji replied. Soon after, everyone was gathered in a hallway facing a huge pipe, adorned door. As Naruto attempted to push open the door but it refused to budge, Zei remarked, incredible. Naruto stepped back and swiftly thrust his arms forward after Kakashi said, you might need air bending to open it. To the surprise of Sasuke and the other 4 archaeologists, the air surrounding Naruto's arms suddenly shot forward and passed through the pipes, unlocking the door. As they entered through the open door, they saw hundreds of statues that spiraled outward from the room's center and even up the walls. These must be the statues of all the known avatars, said Zei. Sakura said, avatars? And Zei gave a nod. When the air nomads were still around, there were 4 different groups of people in the world, each one able to control a different element. But the only one could control all 4 elements, and that was the avatar, said Zei. Naruto entered the center of the room and turned to face the statue. Silently, Naruto said, Korra. After hearing what Naruto had to say, Sasuke questioned, what was that Dobi? It's her, or was her name, exclaimed Naruto, unsure of how he discovered it. How do you know? Inquired Sasuke. As Naruto put it, I don't know. The statue next to it was then approached by Naruto. Before touching it, he said, Aang. Suddenly, the statue's eyes and tattoos began to glow, as did the eyes of every other statue, and the door began to close. Before he and 3 others could exit, Renji shouted, the door's closing, everyone get out. The door closed completely before Team 7 and Zay could get to it, and everything went dark before a bright light filled the room. A severely damaged warship in a fire. Nation harbor in the southern region of the super continent known as the Earth Kingdom was easily outsized by the larger battleships arriving at port. Immediately after the ship docked, a section of the front of the ship descended, revealing that it was a ramp that could be used to exit the ship. The two men who came down the ramp were an older man and a teenager who couldn't have been older than 16. The teenager's most noticeable feature was the large scar around his left eye, which appeared to have been burned. He wore the traditional Fire Nation military uniform and was largely bald, with the exception of a small black hair in a ponytail on the back of his head. The older man had a small beard and shoulder-length gray hair in a ponytail, but the front of his head was bald. Though it was different from the teenagers, he too wore a Fire Nation military uniform. The teenager got down on the ground and they walked on, saying, "Uncle, I want repairs made as quickly as possible. I don't want to stay too long and risk losing his trail." When his nephew turned around and stepped in his direction, the older man exclaimed, "You mean the Avatar?" and stopped. "Don't mention his name on these docks. Once word gets out that he's alive, every fire bender will be out, looking for him. And I don't want anyone getting in the way," the adolescent replied. When the two turned to face the source of the voice, they saw a man wearing a Fire Nation military uniform and brown hair in a ponytail. "Getting in the way of what, Prince Zuko?" they asked. "Captain Zhao," exclaimed the adolescent, who was now known as Zuko, with his arms folded. Before turning to face the elder man and bowing respectfully, Zhao exclaimed, "It's Commander now, and General Iroh Senpai, great hero of our nation." Iroh bowed respectfully and said, "Retired General. The Fire Lord's brother and son are welcome guests anytime. What brings you to my harbor?" Zhao responded. Iroh pointed up to the damage and said, "Our ship is being repaired." Zhao looked in the direction the retired general was pointing. Zhao remarked, "That's quite a bit of damage." Zuko looked down at his uncle and said, "Yes, you wouldn't believe what happened." "Uncle, tell Commander Zhao what happened," he said. Iroh leaned over to his nephew and muttered, "What, did we crash or something?" After saying, "Yes, I will do that, it was incredible." Zuko tried to sound convincing as he said, "Yes, right into an Earth Kingdom ship." Unbelieving their story, Zhao said, "Really? You must regale me with all the thrilling details." Then he leaned in to ask Zuko, "Join me for a drink?" Iroh's hand on Zuko's shoulder stopped him as he started to leave after saying, "Sorry, but we've got to go." Iroh turned to the commander and said, "Prince Zuko.san, show Commander Zhao.san your respect. We would be honored to join you. Do you have any jasmine.tea? It's my favorite." Iroh began to walk, and the commander soon followed, with Zuko grudgingly following behind. Soon after, they entered the commander's tent, where Iroh was examining some spears. Zuko was seated on a chair in front of a table, and Zhao was standing in front of a world map. Zhao turned around and added, "The Fire Lord will finally claim victory in this war, and by year's end, the Earth Kingdom capital will be under our rule." Zuko remarked, "If my father believes that the world will comply voluntarily, then he is a fool." Zhao took a seat beside him. Before deciding to change the topic, Zhao remarked, 2 years at sea has done little to temper your tongue. So, how have your search for the Avatar been going?" The commander asked, as they heard a series of spears fall to the ground. Zhao turned to see Iroh standing over the spears. "My fault entirely," Iroh said, turning to leave. In response to the commander's query, Zuko stated, "We haven't found him yet." After observing Zuko's uncertain expression, Zhao added, "Unless you've found some evidence the Avatar is still alive." "Did you really expect to? The Avatar died 100 years ago with the rest of the air benders." According to Zuko, "No, nothing." Zhao got up and leaned in the direction of the young Prince Zuko, saying, "Prince Zuko, the Avatar is the only one who can stop the Fire Nation from winning this war. If you have an ounce of loyalty left, you'll tell me what you found." Before getting up and making his way to the tent's exit, Zuko remarked, "I haven't found anything. It's like you said, the Avatar probably died a long time ago. Come on uncle, we're going." However, as a Fire Nation soldier entered, Two of the guards who had been on duty at the time brought their spears in a cross in front of Zuko. Commander Zhao. Senpai. We interrogated the crew as you instructed. They confirmed Prince Zuko had the Avatar in custody, but let him escape, said the soldier. Zhao approached Zuko and said, now remind me, how exactly was your ship damaged? Southern Air Temple. Statue room for Avatar. Everyone removed their arms from their eyes to observe that the statues of Korra and Aang in the center of the room were gone, but otherwise, nothing had changed. Sakura said, Sensei, what happened? Kakashi looked down at the young air bender and said, Naruto, can you open the door from this side? And then added, the statues must have reacted to Naruto somehow. Naruto said, I'll try. He then threw a wave of air at the door, but it had no effect. Blaming Naruto for trapping them in the room, Sasuke exclaimed, great, see what you did now, Udobi. Naruto raised his fist menacingly at Sasuke and questioned, what was that, Uteme? Sasuke shouted, it's your fault that we got trapped in here. When Naruto yelled back, hey, how was I supposed to know that this would happen? The doors abruptly opened, and the 5 people turned to see 3 people standing there. One of them was a bald preteen who couldn't have been older than 12. He had a tattoo of an arrow that extended from his head to his hands and feet. He was dressed in the traditional nomad garb as well. A girl with tan skin and long brown hair in a ponytail, adorned with hair loopies that extended from her forehead to just behind her ears, was another of them. She had on a water tribe jacket, too. The oldest of the 3, he wore a water tribe jacket and had short hair pulled back in a ponytail. With his boomerang aimed menacingly at the 4 ninjas and 1 civilian, the eldest of the 3 moved ahead of the other 2. Katara. Nay. Chan, Aang, stand back, they might be Fire Nation, said he. Katara sarcastically remarked, sure. Sokka.ni.san, I'm sure the Fire Nation got through a door, you need air bending to open. Naruto questioned, the Fire Nation? Is that like the Land of Fire? Before moving to stand behind Aang, Sokka exclaimed, aha, so you are from the Fire Nation. Okay, Aang, take them out, Avatar style. Zay walked over to Aang and said, I thought they were extinct, but you're an air nomad. After that, Zay began questioning Aang about a variety of topics. Hey, Kakashi. Sensei. The air nomads died out thousands of years ago, right? So how is it that there's one over there? Replied Sakura. Well, Sakura, to be precise, they went extinct about 2.000 years ago, and as to how he's still alive, well, I have an idea. Kakashi responded. Katara overheard Sakura and Kakashi say, hey, what are you talking about? Most air nomads died out only 100 years ago. Kakashi exclaimed, that proves that my theory is correct. Naruto questioned, what theory, Kakashi? Sensei. Well, I figure that when you touched that statue, we were somehow transported backwards through time, replied Kakashi. Sakura and Naruto screamed, backwards through time? Almost in a panic, Naruto exclaimed, man, how am I supposed to become Hokage now? Don't worry, Naruto, we can simply get back the way we came, Kakashi replied. But the statue that Naruto touched disappeared, and come to think of it, that kid there looks just like that statue, Sasuke replied. Sokka questioned, what are you Fire Nation guys talking about? We're not from this Fire Nation that you keep on talking about, said Sasuke. Katara pointed to Aang and Sokka, saying, by the way, my name is Katara. This is Aang.kun. The paranoid one is my brother Sokka.ni.san. Saying, I'm Hitaki Kakashi, and these are my 3 students, Uzumaki Naruto, Uchiha Sasuke, and Haruno Sakura. And the man over there is Professor Zay.san. Kakashi pointed to each of them. So, if you guys are from the future, what are you doing here? Asked Sokka. As Aang approached the 4 ninjas, Kakashi remarked, we don't entirely know, but the Avatar statues somehow reacted to Naruto's presence. Why'd they do that? They should only react to the Avatar, in other words me, Aang replied. When Kakashi exclaimed, well, there's actually a good reason why they reacted to Naruto. He saw that everyone, with the exception of Zay.san, was staring at him with perplexed looks. Kakashi turned to face Naruto and had no choice but to inform the blonde heir. Bender, Naruto, there's something you should know. Wondering what Kakashi-sensei would tell him, Naruto questioned, like what? Then Kakashi began to explain, saying, before I tell you however, you should become familiar with the legend of the Avatar. Fire. Nation Harbor, tent of the Commander Zhao was passing in front of Zuko, who was seated in a chair in the tent with 2 guards standing behind him. Zhao paused after saying, so, a 12-year-old boy beat you in your fire benders. You're more pathetic than I thought. I underestimated him once, but it will not happen again, said Zuko. No, it will not because you won't have a second chance, Zhao replied. Zuko started to say, Commander Zhao, I've been hunting the Avatar 2 years but Zhao cut him off. The 2 guards restrained Zuko from attacking the commander after Zhao remarked, and you failed. Capturing the Avatar is too important to leave to a teenager's hands. He's mine now. As Zuko kicked the table and Zhao left, he said, keep them here. Iroh said, more tea please. Air Temple in the south. To Naruto's surprise, Kakashi began by telling him about the Avatar, a man who could control all 4 elements. Every time the Avatar died, he would simply be reborn into a different element, and the cycle would continue. However, the Avatar appeared to vanish around 2,000 years ago when ninjutsu was created by the legendary Rakudo Sennin. Although nobody, not even the Avatar, was aware of it, the Avatar continued to reincarnate. Furthermore, Naruto was the current Avatar. Just try to picture Sasuke's thoughts at this moment. After recovering from his shock, Naruto remarked, I knew I was awesome. Aang remarked, well this is awkward. How is this possible? How is this Avatar able to survive? Sasuke thought. I am a Uchiha. If anyone were the Avatar, it should be me. And here I thought Naruto was just a regular brat, but he has the potential to be the world's strongest man. More powerful than Sasuke.kun. Sakura began to blush and thought. Wait a minute, Aang.kun. Could Naruto.kun be the one that you were supposed to meet here? Katara responded. The others followed Aang as he walked past the ninjas and into the room, saying, no, I don't think so. Sokka stopped in front of a statue and said, statues? That's it? Where's the meat? Katara questioned, who are all these people? Kakashi stated, they're all of the past avatars. Sakura questioned, then are all these Naruto's past lives? As Aang and Naruto paused in front of the statue in the center of the room, Zay clarified, exactly, these are all of the avatars from the very first avatar till the last one who came before Aang.san. They appeared to suddenly lose themselves in the statue's gaze. As she shook Aang, Katara said, Aang.kun, get over it. Sakura shook Naruto and both boys snapped out of it, saying, you too Naruto. Who is that? Inquired Katara. As Sokka approached them, Naruto remarked, it's Avatar Roku, the avatar that came before Aang.san. You were a fire bender, no wonder I didn't trust you when we first met, Sokka replied. Naruto questioned, and what's your excuse with me? Actually Naruto, he'd have the same excuse, since like Aang.san, you.re also an air bender. Meaning that you had the potential to become a fire bender in your previous life. Kakashi responded. Naruto nodded in response to Aang's question, you're an air bender? The blonde avatar replied, yeah, but I don't know much about it. Aang said, in that case, I could teach you. That'd be great, cried Naruto. Sakura questioned, wait, there's no writing, how do you know who it is? Naruto said, I don't know. Then they heard footsteps and turned to see a shadow coming. They quickly hid behind some of the statues. In a whisper, Sokka said, fire benders, nobody make a sound. In response, Katara whispered, you're making a sound. Before preparing to attack, Sokka muttered, that fire bender won't know what hit him. When he leapt out of his hiding spot, he discovered it was just a lemur.bat. Lemur! Cried Aang, and Sokka said, dinner. Don't listen to him, you're gonna be my new pet, Aang replied. Not if I get him first. Sokka said this before he and Aang sprinted in the direction of the tiny lemur.bat. The lemur hissed like a cat and then fled, with the two of them trailing closely behind. Aang shouted, wait, come back. I want to devour you, Sokka screamed. The lemur.bat was pursued by Aang and Sokka as they left the room and went down a lengthy hallway. Sokka was able to pass the young avatar, but the said air bender used his air bending to accelerate and sprinted past Sokka. Then Sokka pulled out his club and attempted to swipe at Aang's legs, but the avatar just ran on the wall using his air bending, and when he was close enough to Sokka, he sprinted back down onto the floor and hurled a ball of air at the water tribe fighter. As Aang kept following the lemur.bat to a small balcony, the lemur simply leapt off and spread his arms, revealing a pair of white bat-like wings, and flew away. Sokka stumbled over the ball and fell to the ground. But Aang was not going to give up easily, so he just leapt off the balcony after the lemur.bat. Sokka shouted from the balcony, "Hey, no fair. Fire. Nation Harbor, tent of the commander." As he stepped into the tent, Zhao declared, "My search party is ready. Once I'm out, my guard will escort you back to your ship and you'll be free to go." Zhao immediately burst out laughing when Zuko asked, "Why? Are you worried I'm going to try and stop you?" "You, stop me? Impossible," Zhao exclaimed after he had finished laughing. Zuko stood up, saying, "Don't underestimate me, Zhao. I will capture the avatar before you." Iroh stood up. "Prince Zuko-san, that's enough," he exclaimed. "You can't compete with me. I have hundreds warships under my command. And you're just a banished prince. No home, no allies. Your own father doesn't even want you," Zhao replied. "You're wrong. Once I deliver the avatar to my father, he'll welcome me home with honor and restore my rightful place on the throne," Zuko replied. "If your father really wanted you home, he would have let you return by now, avatar or no avatar, but in his eyes, you are a failure and a disgrace to the Fire Nation," Zhao replied. Zuko stated, "That's not true." Zhao remarked, "You have the scar to prove it." Zuko shouted, "Maybe you'd like one to match?" Zhao questioned, "Is that a challenge?" Zuko exclaimed, "An Agniki at sunset." Before leaving, Zhao remarked, "Very well, it's a shame your father won't be here to watch me humiliate you. I guess your uncle will do." "Prince Zuko-san, have you forgotten last time you dueled a master?" Iroh inquired. Zuko remarked, "I'll never forget. Air Temple in the south." After the lemur.bat hit the ground and Aang landed nearby, the aforementioned avatar jumped in the direction of the tiny creature, but the lemur escaped and crashed into a tent. As Aang followed the lemur.bat into the tent and pushed aside some cloth, he noticed the remains of Fire Nation soldiers. "Come back, come on out, little lemur, that hungry guy won't bother you anymore." In addition to saying, "Fire Benders, they were here," he also saw the remains of his former instructor, Gyatso Sensei. Then, before Sokka entered the tent, Aang collapsed to his knees. The young avatar was crying when Sokka asked, "Aang, you found my dinner yet?" He approached Aang and said, "Aang, I wasn't really gonna eat the lemur. Okay. However, the water tribe warrior saw Gyatso's remains and said, 'Oh, man. Come on, Aang. Everything will be all right. Let's get out of here.'" As soon as Sokka placed his hand on Aang's shoulder, he could tell that something was amiss because Aang's eyes and tattoos began to glow. As the others returned to the Hall of Statues, they were examining the various statues when all of the statues' eyes began to glow. Before running to where Aang was, Katara uttered the words, "Aang.kun." However, as she turned around, she noticed that Naruto's eyes and whisker marks were also glowing, and strong winds began to gather in the room. Sakura shouted, Kakashi, Sensei, what's going on?" In place of Kakashi, Zei responded, "It's the Avatar. State, an Avatar's most powerful technique." Sasuke threw a ball of fire at Naruto, thinking they had to knock out the blonde, but the strong winds extinguished the flames. Kaden. Gukakyo no Jutsu. Wind does contribute to the spread of fire, but excessive wind will extinguish the flames. Sakura screamed, "Naruto, stop this," but to no effect. Katara fled out the door as Zei yelled, "It's not Naruto that you should stop, it's Aang. He's the one who went into the Avatar state, and he forced Naruto with him." In the meantime, the same thing was taking place in various temples across the globe, including those in the Fire Nation, the Water Tribe, and the Earth Kingdom. As strong winds began to gather around Aang and Sokka in the tent, a huge pillar of wind blew up into the sky, destroying the tent and throwing Sokka out. When Katara arrived, she inquired what happened. He discovered that fire benders had murdered Gyatso, Sokka exclaimed. Before approaching Aang, Katara remarked, "Oh, no, it's his avatar spirit, he must have triggered it. I'm gonna try and calm him down." Sokka was struggling and clinging to the rocks when he exclaimed, "Well, do it before he blows us off the mountain." Katara said, "Air." Bender was lifted into the air as she approached Aang. The Agni Arena and Fire Nation Harbor. Zhao and Zuko, both wearing only their pants, were seated on the floor at opposite ends of the arena, facing the wall. "Remember your fire bending basics, Prince Zuko. They're your greatest weapons," Iroh replied. Before getting up and turning to face the commander, Zuko uttered the words, "I refuse to let him win." Zhao turned around and said, "This will be over quickly, he had just gotten up himself." Both fighters then assumed a stance as a Fire Nation soldier sounded a gong to announce the beginning of the Agni. The first to move was Zuko, who hurled a fireball at the commander, who merely moved aside before avoiding another fireball from the disgraced prince. Zuko hurled another ball of fire at Zhao, but the commander just shielded himself with his arms and spread the flames out as soon as they struck. Zuko then swiftly made a full circle and, as he did, he raised his foot in the air and swiftly swung it down, launching a stream of fire at Zhao. However, Fire Bender threw his arms back and held them forward, causing the stream of fire to split and pass by next to him. Zhao caused some fire to flare up in his hands before he swiped them across the ground and blocked Zuko's fireball after he leapt into the air and kicked it directly at him. After that, Zhao threw his arm forward, sending a wave of fire at the prince, who put his arms in front of himself and split the flames so they passed by him and into the ground. However, Zhao then threw out both of his arms, sending a third wave of fire, but Zuko was able to defend himself as before. The prince was flung to the ground this time when Zhao threw out both of his arms in a double palm strike and sent Zuko a stronger wave. When Zuko attempted to stand up, Zhao leapt into the air, landed in front of the embarrassed prince, and threw a fireball at him. The prince reportedly ducked the ball, got on his hands, spun around, tripped Zhao's legs, and then stood up. Zhao stood up again, but Zuko swung his own feet along the ground in the direction of the commander, sending tiny streams of fire. This made Zhao back off, and then Zuko kicked a ball of fire at Zhao with his foot in the air, sending the commander to the ground. Zuko stopped over the commander and got ready to strike him, but he just stood there, staring down at Zhao. When Zhao screamed, "Do it!" Zuko launched a ball of fire that struck the earth directly to the left of Zhao's head. Zhao remarked, "That's it? Your father raised a coward." Zuko turned around and left after saying, "Next time you get in my way, I promise I won't hold back." Zhao stood up and tried to kick a fireball at Zuko, but Iroh caught his foot before the ball could launch completely and threw Zhao back. Zuko was going to run over and kill Zhao because he was furious that he was going to shoot him in the back, but his uncle stopped him. "No, Prince Zuko. Do not taint your victory," Iroh replied prior to looking at Zhao. "So this is how great Commander Zhao acts in defeat? Disgraceful. Even in exile my nephew is more honorable than you. Thanks again for the tea, it was delicious." Then, while Zhao sat there staring at their retreating backs, Zuko and Iroh left. After they had left the arena, Zuko questioned, "Did you really mean that, uncle?" As they walked to their ship, Iroh remarked, "Of course, I told you jasmine tea is my favorite." Air Temple in the south, the strong winds kept anyone from getting close to Aang, so he was in the air. Aang.Kun, I know you're upset and I know how hard it is to lose the people you love. I went through the same thing when I lost my Ka. Chan. Monk Gyatso and the other air benders may be gone, but you've still got a family. Sokka.ni.san. I. Naruto.Kun. Sasuke.san. Sakura.san. Kakashi.san and Zei.san. We're your family now. Katara yelled as Aang lowered himself to the floor. Sokka and Katara approached Aang and said, "We're not gonna let anything happen to you." As Katara took Aang's hand, his eyes and tattoos returned to normal, and he collapsed back into Katara's arms. Aang said, closing his eyes, "I'm sorry." Aang opened his eyes when Katara said, It's okay, it wasn't your fault. Before he closed his eyes, Aang remarked, but you were right, and if fire benders found this temple, that means they found the other ones too. The three looked up to see the others standing there and Kakashi carrying a weary Naruto on his back. I see that everything down here has settled. Aang and Naruto were examining the statue of Roku when everyone returned to the Hall of Statues. Katara approached them and said, everything's packed. You two ready to go? How is Roku supposed to help me? Help us when we can't talk to him, Aang inquired. When they heard something and turned to see the lemur. Bat holding some fruit, Katara said, maybe you'll find a way. He jumped over to Sokka, placed the fruit in front of him, and the water. Tribe warrior began to eat. Looks like you made a new friend, Sokka, Aang replied. As he kept eating, Sokka remarked, can't talk, must eat. Afterward, the lemur. Bat sprinted towards Naruto's shoulder and remained there. Naruto patted his new pet and remarked, I guess he likes me the best. Let's see what I should call you. How about Momo? 8 people and 2 animals later found themselves on a cliff beneath the temple. While Naruto, Sasuke, Sakura, Kakashi, Sokka, Katara, and Momo were seated in the saddle and Professor Zay stood on the ground. Aang was perched atop his sky. Bison, Appa. Aang questioned the professor, you sure, you don't want to come with us? As much as I'd love to, I can't. To be sent into the past is every archaeologist's dream. So I'm going to explore this world and see what wonders it holds. Zay replied. The professor was left behind as the big, 6-legged beast lifted off the ground and flew away after Aang said, all right then, until next time. Appa, yip. As he watched them take off, Zay thought to himself, maybe I should have come with them after all. Iroh came into the room where Zuko was sitting on his ship, meditating in front of a table that had 4 candles lit on it. Without taking his eyes off the candles in front of him, Zuko remarked, the only reason you should be interrupting me is if you have news about the Avatar. Well, there is news, Prince Zuko-san, but you might not like it. Don't get too upset. Iroh responded. Uncle, you taught me that keeping a leveled head is a sign of a great leader. Now whatever you have to say, I'm sure I can take it. Zuko replied. Iroh exclaimed, okay then. We have no idea where he is. As the candle flames erupted into the ceiling. Iroh pulled out a fan and began waving it as Zuko turned around and stood up, shouting, what? As the candlelight returned to its typical intensity, Iroh remarked, you really should open a window in here. Zuko grabbed a scroll that Iroh was holding and yelled, give me the map, before unfolding it. There have been multiple sightings of the Avatar, but he is impossible to track down, Iroh stated. Zuko asked, how am I gonna find him, uncle? As he studied the map that depicted the Avatar and his friend's trail. Needless to say, there were no patterns on the trail. Aang and his group had been moving in a zigzag pattern ever since they left the South Pole. He is clearly a master at evasive maneuvering, Zuko said. The Kyoshi Sea at the moment, the group was atop Appa, with Aang perched atop the head of the sky. Bison. Naruto feeding his new pet, Momo, Sakura, and Katara conversing while Katara sewed Sokka's trousers, and Sokka, Kakashi, and Sasuke examining a map of the southern parts of the globe. Aang.san may not notice it, but all these seemingly random stops with no pattern to them would make it impossible for the Fire Nation to track us, said Kakashi. Well, let's hope we can keep this up till we reach our destination. What is our destination anyway? Sasuke replied. Sokka declared, we're on our way to the North Pole. The North Pole? Inquired Naruto. That's right. There's a water tribe city there, so we're going there so that Aang and Katara. Chan can learn water bending, Sokka replied. Why not rather go to the South Pole? It's a lot closer, Sasuke replied. That's where we started from. Katara. Chan's the last water bender in the southern water tribe village, Sokka replied. After giving it some thought, Kakashi added, but we would need to find out if the rest of us have the ability to bend one of the elements. In that case, I think it would be a good idea for Naruto to learn water bending as well. Not everyone can bend. Look at me for example, Sokka replied. That might be true, but I am of the Uchiha clan. There's no way that I don't have the ability to bend, Sasuke replied. In that case, it's probably fire, and as you know, there aren't actually any fire, Benders out there who'd be willing to teach an associate of the Avatar. Naruto said as he presented Momo with a berry. Aang pulled out 3 marbles and used them to form a ring of air inside the ring after saying, "Hey Katara. Shan, look at this new bending move I learned." Without glancing down at the preteen, Katara remarked, "That's great Aang.kun." Aang stopped his air bending trick and closed his hands around the ring, saying, "You didn't even look." Katara stared down at the young Avatar and remarked, "That's great." Aang expressed disappointment by saying, "But I'm not doing it now." "Stop bugging her, air head. You need to give girls space when they do their sewing," Sokka replied. Katara looked at her brother and asked, "What does me, being a girl, have to do with sewing?" "Simple, girls are better at fixing pants than guys. And guys are better at hunting and fighting and stuff like that. It's just the natural order of things," Sokka replied. Kakashi wondered what he would say if he ever met Tsunade-sama. Katara threw the pants at Sokka, causing them to fall onto his head, after saying, "All done with your pants, and look what a great job I did." After removing the pants and passing his arm through a hole in them, Sokka said, "Wait, I was just kidding. I can't wear these." Katara.Nay. "Chan please. You won't need any pants where we're going, Sokka.San," Aang said, pulling on the reins. Island of Kyoshi. They descended from Appa's back shortly after landing on the beach of an island surrounded by numerous mountains. "We just made a pit stop yesterday. We'd cover much more ground if we continued flying," Sasuke replied. Sasuke. "Kun's right, at this rate, we won't get to the North Pole till spring," Sakura responded. Appa grunted in response to Aang's statement, "But Appa's tired already. Aren't you, boy?" I said, "Aren't you, boy?" Then Appa yawned, but nobody was persuaded. Still, hard to argue with a 10-ton magical monster. Sokka remarked mockingly, "Yeah, that was real convincing." Pointing to a big fish that leapt out of the water and then descended again, Aang said, "Look. That's why we're here, elephant.koi. And I'm gonna ride it. Katara. Chan, you've gotta watch me." After stripping off, Aang dove into the water and hurried out, shouting, "Cooled." Just before an elephant.koi emerged with Aang on its back, Aang swam a little farther before plunging into the water. While Katara, Naruto, and Sakura watched in awe, Sokka watched with his arms folded and without enthusiasm. Sasuke and Kakashi, however, showed no interest at all. Katara remarked, "He looks pretty good out there." Sokka exclaimed, "Are you kidding? The fish is doing all the work?" Katara saw that Appa was going to consume something that he shouldn't. She ran to him and screamed, "No Appa, don't eat that." However, Aang was disappointed to see Katara. Chan go as he turned to face the beach, but he was unaware that a much larger sea creature was pursuing the fish he was riding. Just before one of the 3 elephant kois was pulled into the water, Sasuke remarked, "There's something out there." Aang was still oblivious to the threat. Katara approached the others and asked, "What's wrong?" Naruto exclaimed, "Aang San's in trouble," before rushing to the water and, much to everyone's surprise, running over it. As he watched his pupil, Kakashi thought, "It must be the Avatar spirit. It probably knows about the water walking technique from the previous avatars, and with the right training, he might even learn the jutsus of previous avatars as well." A large serpentine creature emerged from the water, looked down on the young Avatar, and then leapt down to try to eat the air bender. A moment later, the fish Aang was riding on was pulled under the water by the sea creature, and Aang fell forward into the water. However, just before the monster hit the water, Naruto grabbed Aang and moved out of its way. Shortly after, it rose again as Naruto performed a series of hand signals that Kakashi recognized right away. It's impossible that Naruto would be aware of that. Could he be acting instinctively? Impossible, he said, referring to the hand signals for Suiryuden, performing a jutsu technique that an avatar from the past used. As Naruto executed the last hand sign and released the jutsu, Kakashi pondered. Sweden. Suiryuden no jutsu. He then spit out a water dragon, causing Kakashi's eyes to enlarge because only the Nidaime Hokage, Senju Tobirama, had ever been able to do that. Tobirama might have been an avatar. It was conceivable, and if he was descended from the water tribe, it would account for his innate ability to use Suiden jutsus. As Naruto and Aang ran back towards the beach, or rather, Naruto ran, Aang swam, The water dragon struck the sea serpent, sending it plummeting into the water. However, Naruto lost consciousness and fell into the water as they approached the beach. As he approached the others, Kakashi picked up the young avatar and carried the preteen on his back. For once, Naruto asked feebly, "Kakashi, Sensei, what happened?" It seemed that being possessed by the Nidame's spirit had a negative effect on him. He doesn't remember what happened, but when he announced the jutsu's name, it wasn't even his voice. Could the Nidame really have possessed him? Kakashi said with an eye. "Smile, don't worry about it." Naruto leapt off Kakashi's back as they returned to the beach, and the two of them walked to the others while Aang changed into his clothes. Sakura questioned, "Naruto, how'd you do that?" Naruto questioned, "How'd I do what, Sakura-chan? Does he not recall?" Sasuke pondered. Katara inquired, "What was that thing?" After finishing his clothing, Aang remarked, "I don't know." As soon as Kakashi sensed something, a group of warriors wearing green dresses, fans for weapons, and white makeup descended from the trees and surrounded the group. "Well, let's not stick around to find out. Time to hit the road," Sokka said. They swiftly knocked out Sokka, Katara, Aang, Naruto, Sakura, and Momo without saying a word, but Kakashi and Sasuke managed to evade the assailants with ease. Sasuke declared the name of his favorite jutsu, Kaden, Gukakyo no Jutsu. A fireball was aimed directly at one of the fighters, but she easily avoided it, and the one who had positioned themselves behind him knocked Sasuke out. Kakashi had no problems with them at all, but since he was outnumbered and everyone else was unconscious, he chose to give up for the time being and wait to see what would happen. Village of Kyoshi. The people of the island, who thought the group was from the Fire Nation, were in front of them, blindfolded, and tied to a pole with the statue of Kyoshi, the Avatar, on top. The fact that Sasuke had fire bended further complicated matters for the group. After the group had regained consciousness, the village elder said, "You seven have some explaining to do." A girl beside him said, "And if you don't answer all our questions, we're throwing you back into the water with the Unagi." "Show yourself, cowards!" Sokka screamed, and the girl took off his blindfold as the other fighters took off theirs. Sokka questioned, "Who are you? Where are the men who attacked us?" The girl who seemed to be in charge of the female warriors, Suki, said, "There were no men, we ambushed you. Now tell us, who are you and what are you doing here?" Before Suki approached him and took hold of his collar, Sokka remarked, "Wait a second, there's no way a bunch of girls took us down." "A bunch of girls, huh? The Unagi's gonna eat well tonight," Suki replied. "No, don't hurt him, he didn't mean it, my brother's just an idiot sometimes," Katara replied. "It's my fault, I'm sorry we came here to ride the elephant. Koi," Aang replied. "How do we know you're not Fire Nation spies? One of you even used fire bending during the battle," the elder in the village replied. Naruto and the others who could looked at Sasuke and asked inquisitively, "Fire bending?" According to Sasuke, "I used the Gukakyo. You know, Sasuke, it might not be a good idea to use Kaden jutsus right now. Though it's too late now, I suppose," Kakashi responded. The elder went on, "Kyoshi has not entered the war yet, and we plan to do so." "Kyoshi? I know her," both Naruto and Aang exclaimed simultaneously. "Huh? How could you possibly know her? Avatar Kyoshi lived here 400 years ago, she's been dead for centuries," the older gentleman replied. "We know her because we're the Avatars, Datbeo," said Naruto. "That's impossible, the last Avatar was an air bender who disappeared 100 years ago, and there's only supposed to be one Avatar, not two," Suki responded. The elder gave the order, "Throw the imposters to the Unagi," as the warriors emerged with their fans and advanced on the pole. Katara said, "Aang.kun, Naruto.san, do some air bending." Aang leapt into the air, soared over the statue, and then slowly sank to the ground, landing in front of the villagers. Then, in an attempt to demonstrate that he is also an air bender, Naruto leapt into the air and landed on the statue's head. The elder pointed to Naruto and remarked, "It's true, you are the Avatar. But that still doesn't prove his claim, even if he is an air bender." Naruto claimed, "But I am the Avatar too. I've just come here from the future," and the villagers, oddly enough, accepted his claim. Aang pulled out 3 marbles and demonstrated the trick he had tried to demonstrate to Katara-chan earlier, saying, "Now, check this out." Rumors then swiftly spread throughout the vicinity of Kyoshi Island and the Kyoshi Sea, eventually reaching Prince Zuko. Zuko got up and started to leave, saying, "Uncle, get the rhinos ready. He's not getting away from me this time. The Avatar's on Kyoshi Island?" Iroh pointed to the fish that Zuko was most likely eating for breakfast and asked, "Are you going to finish that?" As he grabbed the plate the fish was on and left, Zuko shouted, "I was going to save it for later." Iroh scowled. Village of Kyoshi. Everyone was seated around a table that had been laden with food, with the exception of Kakashi and Sokka. Why weren't Sokka and Kakashi seated at the table? Sokka was upset that a group of girls had beaten him, while Kakashi stood in the corner, leaning against the wall and reading his favorite book. As he began to eat, Aang remarked, "All right, dessert for breakfast. These people sure know how to treat an avatar. Katara-chan, you've got to try this." As Katara accepted the food that Aang had offered her, she remarked, "Well, maybe just a bite." Naruto glanced at Sokka, who was sitting right next to Kakashi, and asked, "Why aren't you eating, Sokka?" Sokka declared, "I'm not hungry." Sakura remarked, "Well, that's a first." "He's just upset that a bunch of girls kicked his butt yesterday," Katara replied. Sokka shot back, "They snuck up on me," Katara remarked, "and then they kicked your butt." Sokka got up and walked to the door, saying, "Sneak attacks don't count. Tie me up with ropes, I'll show them a thing or two, for example." "You know, Sokka, in our time there are a lot of girls who became powerful kunoichi," Kakashi replied, and when Sokka paused, he, "Take Tsunade Sama of the 3 great Sannin for example, there isn't anyone I know with greater physical strength. And then there's also my sensei's wife, who was even stronger than him." "Well, he couldn't have been very strong then," Sokka replied. Sakura inquired, "Who was your sensei?" Kakashi exclaimed, "The Yondaime Hokage, Namikaze Minato." "I didn't know that the Yondaime had a wife. What was her name? And how was she stronger than him?" replied Naruto. Kakashi had wanted to avoid answering this particular question because it would reveal Naruto's parents, and if people found out, wait a minute, they are in the past, and if Naruto learned to use all 4 elements, Minato Sensei's enemies couldn't kill him even if they did. When Kakashi exclaimed, "Uzumaki, Kushina," everyone in the room gasped and turned to stare at Naruto. Naruto shared the Yondaime's wife's last name, after all. Everyone turned to look at Kakashi when he said, "And for your other question, she had a Kekkei Genkai that could easily qualify as the most powerful, instead." Naruto questioned, "Wait a minute, I'm related to the Yondaime?" Kakashi exclaimed, "Not only related, well, you could say that he's your father." Naruto slammed his hands on the table and immediately got to his feet. Naruto screamed, accusing his sensei, "What? Why didn't you or Gigi ever tell me?" His finger raised. Both Minato and Kushina had many enemies, and if word got out that their son was alive, you'd be targeted by assassins, and probably even put in the Iwa Bingo book with a high bounty on your head just so that bounty hunters would try and kill you. Kakashi continued. Inquiring as to how Kekkei Genkai could surpass the Sharingan in power, Sasuke questioned, "What was that Kekkei Genkai that you said could be the most powerful?" "It was called chakra chains. She was able to send chains of pure chakra out of any part of her body at will, with absolutely no blind spots, and the chains could even hold down the strongest of opponents, form impenetrable barriers, and they could even break through any kind of defense without problem," Kakashi stated. Naruto yelled, "Really? I can't wait till I unlock that Kekkei Genkai." Sasuke was shocked by what he was hearing and didn't want to. It seems that the last person to die at the academy, Naruto, might be able to unleash a Kekkei Genkai that is even more powerful than the Sharingan. Sasuke smiled as Kakashi said, "I wouldn't get my hopes up if I were you, Naruto. Even among the Uzumaki clan there were only a few that was ever able to unlock the chakra chains. In fact, I've only ever seen or heard of one Uzumaki who was able to unlock it, and that was your mother." Kakashi's next statement, however, "You're the Avatar, so it might be possible for you to unlock it," quickly put an end to Sasuke's smile. Naruto cried out, "Seriously? Man, I love being the Avatar. But you still shouldn't get your hopes up, remember, you're still the dead last," Sasuke replied. "Oh yeah? You think you're so tough just because you're of a special clan? Replied Naruto. My clan was a lot more special than yours were, Sasuke replied. Actually Sasuke, the Uzumaki clan probably had your beat in the special clan department. They had extraordinary chakra reserves that would make the Uchihas pale by comparison. They were masters at sealing jutsus. They, even though it was only a few of them, had what could be the most powerful Kekkei Genkai. They had unnaturally long life spans, and to top it off, they were feared throughout the world, even in remote places where the people have never even heard of the Uchiha clan. Kakashi responded. Then how is it that I've never heard of the Uzumaki clan before? Sasuke inquired. Well, during the last great shinobi war, all of the shinobi villages, except for Konoha and our allies, banded together to destroy Uzushiogakure no Sato, home village of the Uzumaki clan, Kakashi said before continuing to read. Kyoshi village and the training hall for Kyoshi warriors. In spite of Kakashi's statement that strong female fighters would be present in the future, Sokka later walked to the Kyoshi warriors training hall to demonstrate who was in charge. As he made his way to the training hall, Sokka thought to himself, I can't believe I got beat up by a bunch of girls. Sokka walked in and began stretching, saying, Sorry girls, I didn't mean to interrupt your dance lesson. I was just looking for somewhere to get a little work out. Well, you've come to the right place. Sorry about yesterday. I didn't know you were friends with the avatars, Suki replied. It's alright. I mean, normally I'd hold a grudge, but seeing as you guys are a bunch of girls, I'll make an exception, Sokka replied. Suki sarcastically remarked, I should hope so. A big, strong man like you. We wouldn't stand a chance. As he stopped stretching, Sokka said, True, but don't feel bad. After all, I'm the best warrior of my village. He deliberately omitted the fact that he was the best warrior only after all the adult warriors had left the village to fight in the war. Wow, the best warrior, huh? In your whole village? Maybe you'd be kind enough to give us a little demonstration, Suki replied. Sokka started to say, oh, well, but was interrupted when Suki turned to face the other fighters. The other girls laughed and nodded when she said, Come on girls, wouldn't you like him to show us some moves? As he assumed a stance and charged at Suki, Sokka said, Well, if that's what you want, I'd be happy to. Alright, you stand over there. Now this may be a little tough on you, but try to block me. Suki just struck Sokka's shoulder with her folded fan and declared that the water tribe warrior had been knocked back. Sokka placed his hand on his shoulder and said, Good, of course I went easy on you. According to Suki, of course. As Sokka attempted to kick the female warrior, she merely ducked under his leg and swiped her right arm at his other leg, causing him to fall back and hit the floor with a loud thud. Let's see if you can handle this, Sokka said. Sokka said, That does it. He stood up and lunged at Suki, trying to punch her, but she just grabbed his arm and threw him around her before stopping, removing his belt, and tying it around his foot and wrist. Subsequently, she pushed Sokka slightly, causing him to stumble forward and eventually fall to the ground. Before the other girls began to laugh and Sokka flushed with shame, Suki asked, Anything else you want to teach us? The warship of Zuko, Kyoshi Sea standing on his ship's deck, Zuko peered through his telescope. He put the telescope away and turned back to his soldiers, saying, There it is, Kyoshi Island. Get the rhinos. We'll be at the island soon. You should be careful, Prince Zuko-san. There's a reason why the Fire Nation has left that island alone for so long. Word has it that the warriors of that island use the Kyoshi style of fighting, and that is the most dangerous of the non-bending fighting styles. Iroh continued. Zuko exclaimed, I'm sure we can handle it, uncle, before turning to face the island in the distance. Kyoshi village and the training hall for Kyoshi warriors. For a different reason, Sokka returned to the training hall where the warriors were still in training. As he walked in, Sokka said, Hey Suki. As Suki put it, hoping for another dance lesson. Sokka responded, No well, let me explain. Suki said, Spit it out, what do you want? And Sokka abruptly dropped to his knees and bowed to her. Sokka exclaimed, I would be honored if you would teach me. Suki questioned, Even if I'm a girl? I'm sorry if I insulted you earlier, I was wrong, Sokka replied. We normally don't teach outsiders, let alone boys, Suki replied. With a lower head, Sokka said, Please make an exception, I won't let you down. Suki said, okay, but you have to follow all of our traditions, as Sokka raised her head. Of course, replied Sokka. Suki exclaimed, and I mean all of them. After a short while, Sokka appeared wearing a dress that was exactly like Suki's and the other warriors, along with white makeup. Do I really have to wear this? It feels a little girly, Sokka replied. Sokka appeared slightly more assured about the dress as Suki declared, it's a warrior's uniform, you should be proud. The silk thread symbolizes the brave blood that flows through our veins. The gold insignia represents the honor of the warrior's heart. Sokka exclaimed, bravery and honor, as Aang passed. Before leaving again, Aang said, hey Sokka-san, nice dress. Sokka's confident expression turned to a frown. Then Naruto passed by, and he burst out laughing at the sight of Sokka. As he ran out of the hall with a fan in his hand, Sokka yelled, hey, stop that will you? He swiped the fan at the young avatar. But Naruto easily dodged it by backflipping, and just before he hit the ground, he slashed his right arm upwards, sending a wave of air at Sokka, who was flung back into the hall and collided with the opposite wall. It would probably be a good idea for you to not attack the avatar, Suki said as Naruto, still laughing, left to explain what he had just witnessed to Sakura, Chan and Katara-san. Beach on Kyoshi Island. Sasuke patrolled the beach in case a Fire Nation ship arrived. He was concerned because the island had not yet been hit by the war, possibly because the warriors were so skilled, but he also believed that the longer the war lasted, the more likely it was that the Fire Nation would attack. He suddenly noticed a ship in the distance, and he knew right away that it had to be a Fire Navy ship when he saw the red flag with the Fire Nation insignia on it. The Fire Nation. Here, what would they want? And why would they bring just one ship to this place? Sasuke pondered, but when the ramp on the front of the ship lowered and a number of Fire Nation soldiers emerged on Komodo rhinos. Among them Prince Zuko. He had no time to consider his options. Kyoshi Village and the training hall for Kyoshi warriors. Naruto, Sakura, and Katara were enjoying watching Sokka in a dress while Suki and Sokka were training when the elder unexpectedly arrived. The elder exclaimed, fire benders have landed on our shores. Avatar Naruto and girls, come quickly. Before he fled, with Suki, Naruto, Sakura, and Katara trailing behind. Before Sokka ran after the others, Momo leapt down on his shoulder and said, hey, I'm not whatever. Kyoshi Village, Kyoshi statue. There were 4 Komodo rhinos in front of the Kyoshi statue, and Zuko was seated on one of them. When Zuko said, come out Avatar, you can't hide from me forever, no one responded, so he said, find him. The young bald monk was then located by Zuko's soldiers riding into the village, oblivious to the presence of 2 avatars and the warriors pursuing them. Unexpectedly, the Kyoshi warriors leapt from the roofs and defeated every fire bender that was looking. Suki then charged at Zuko, who threw a fireball at her, but she ducked and kept going. When Zuko threw another fireball at her, she leapt to her feet and was about to use her fans to knock the prince down when Zuko grabbed the reins and his Komodo rhino swatted the girl away with its tail. After Suki was captured by Naruto, he turned to face Zuko. Naruto put Suki down on her feet and said, looking for me? What are you talking about? I'm looking for the avatar, replied Zuko. In spite of the circumstance, Naruto exclaimed, that's me, with a smile. Zuko grew more irate with each sentence before he threw a fireball at the blonde. You? Impossible. The avatar's a bald monk. You're nothing but a blonde fool. Don't tell me that I came all the way here on word that the avatar's here, just to find out that it's just an imposter, he exclaimed. Prince was flung from his Komodo rhino and struck the wall, according to Naruto, who sidestepped the fireball and hurled a wave of air at Zuko. He stood up and Zuko said, you're an air bender? Naruto asserted, hey, I told you, I was the avatar. The fact that you're an air bender proves nothing. It only means that there was one more survivor of your people, said Zuko. I'm from the distant future, Naruto exclaimed, shrugging as though visitors from the future were commonplace. It was the only explanation for the existence of 2 avatars, but Zuko didn't believe the child when he asked, the future? That's right, name's Uzumaki Naruto, son of the Yondaime Hokage, Namikaze Minato and Uzumaki Kushina. "And who might you be?" Naruto began. Zuko declared, "I'm Prince Zuko, son of the Fire Lord." "So you're a prince, huh? Well, I suppose I'm kinda like a prince myself considering that my father was the leader of my village," said Naruto. Before Zuko charged at Naruto, he said, "Enough chat, I'll just capture you and then I can find the other one." However, his feet froze as a splash of water hit him. He turned to see Katara and Sakura where the water had come from. Zuko hurled a fireball at the two girls after rapidly unfreezing his feet by channeling heat through them. However, out of instinct, Sakura moved in front of Katara, and the water in her flask suddenly appeared in front of them, creating a floating wall of ice that was just large enough to block the fireball. Sakura looked down at her hands, not believing what had just happened. She questioned, Did I just water bend?" Zuko then lunged at the two girls, but before he could get to them, two shuriken shot past him. He turned to see where the two lethal projectiles had come from, and he saw Sasuke standing there grinning. "Sasuke-kun," cried Sakura. Sasuke asked, "So, you're Prince Zuko, eh?" Naruto shouted, "How long have you been here?" Sasuke exclaimed, "Since before these guys came here." Naruto shouted, "Then you could have helped out a little." Sasuke chided, "And come in your way? Oh great avatar?" Zuko threw a fireball at Sasuke because he didn't want to be ignored in this way, but Uchiha easily ducked it before launching a kunai and jumping into the air. Zuko then punched a fireball at Uchiha, but it simply went through him. Under Zuko, Sasuke materialized out of nowhere, ready to slam his kunai into the prince, but the prince deflected it by forming fire knives in his hands. Then Sasuke prepared his favorite jutsu and used his free hand to form the Tora sign. He called out the jutsu's name and threw a huge ball of fire at Zuko, but Prince reportedly leapt back and stopped the fire by crossing his arms over his chest. "Kaden Bukakyo no Jutsu." Zuko questioned, "You're a fire bender?" Sasuke grinned and said, "Not quite." He then charged at the prince. After dodging a blow, Zuko kicked Sasuke in the stomach and sent a fireball out of his foot, causing a tiny explosion that sent the Uchiha into the wall. "Why can't I defeat him? Damn it! What gives him his strength?" Sasuke asked himself as he rose to a crouching position and threw the kunai at Zuko. The prince easily sidestepped it and then punched Sasuke with a fireball. When the ball struck, Sasuke fell to the ground once more and then tried to get back up. Zuko remarked, "I don't see why you persist in standing back up." But then he saw that Sasuke's eyes had changed, turning red with 2 in the left and 1 in the right. Then, Sasuke charged at Zuko and tried to punch the fire bender, but the Uchiha jumped over Zuko, landed behind the prince, and punched him in the back. The prince, on the other hand, easily dodged it and tried to kick Sasuke again. With his foot engulfed in flames, Zuko took a few steps forward before turning around and preparing to roundhouse kick Sasuke. To his surprise, the Uchiha leapt over his foot and kicked him in the face, sending him to the ground. "My Sharingan must have woken up because I can follow his movements." After he landed over the prince, Sasuke thought, "Well, would you look at that? A fallen prince?" After that, Zuko spun rapidly, sending waves of fire in all directions. Sasuke couldn't avoid them and was flung back, landing on the ground severely burned. Zuko said, "Look now who has fallen," and rose to his feet, approaching the fallen Uchiha. A strange piece of paper on a kunai suddenly flew in Zuko's direction and embedded itself in the ground in front of him. Zuko exclaimed, "You would need to work on your aim," before noticing that the paper was suddenly on fire. He moved quickly to avoid the paper blowing up and taking the kunai with it. When Zuko turned around, he saw that the person who had thrown the kunai was a silver-haired man wearing a strange green vest and a headband that matched the ones on the red-eyed fire breather, the pink-haired girl, and the blonde avatar. When the masked Cyclop abruptly pulled up his headband, revealing that his left eye was identical to Sasuke's eyes save for the 3 tormos inside, Zuko raised an eyebrow and muttered to himself, "These guys are like cockroaches. If I take down one, more just come crawling out of the woodworks." Zuko questioned, "And who are you supposed to be?" Kakashi declared, "I am Hitaki Kakashi, Jonin of Konohagakure no Sato." After that, Zuko hurled a fireball at Kakashi, but the Jonin reportedly avoided it and charged at the fire prince with a kunai in hand. Zuko used a fire knife to block the kunai and his free hand to shoot a fireball, but the Jonin just ducked and kicked the prince against the wall. Zuko wondered, how could he have seen that? The prince's eyes widened as Kakashi finished for him, coming. What the? He can, Zuko pondered. Read my mind. Kakashi concluded for him once more. Zuko then charged at the copy. Ninja and both of his hands were engulfed in flame. As he approached Kakashi, he thrusted his right hand forward and fired off a wave of fire, but the Jonin easily dodged it and weaved a sequence of hand signs. Kaiten. Gukakyo no Jutsu. He called out and a large fireball flew at Zuko, but suddenly someone appeared in front of the prince and blocked the Gukakyo with his open palm. When the smoke cleared, everyone could see that a seemingly old man had stepped in to save Zuko. WH. What the, uncle? Zuko said in surprise, not having expected his uncle to show up. You shouldn't lose focus, Prince Zuko.san. You came here to capture the Avatar, not to fight these guys, Iroh said. Sorry, but you won't get your hands on either Aang.san or Naruto as long as I'm here, Kakashi said. Zuko.san, you go and take down the Avatar, I'll take care of the rest, Iroh said, and Zuko nodded before rushing over to where Naruto was. Sakura, Sasuke, Katara.san, Sokka.san, Suki.san. You guys stand back, I'll take care of him, Kakashi said. You're gonna fight him alone? Suki asked. This guy is far above any of you to handle, even if you take him on together, Kakashi said. Quite perceptive of you. But it's true, I am on a whole different level than most people. They didn't call me the Dragon of the West for nothing, Iroh said. The Dragon of the West, huh? I didn't expect we'd face him so soon. I don't think I can beat him on my own, Kakashi thought. Not too long ago they had been at a village with a large library where Kakashi had decided to study for a little while, to find out as much as possible about recent events. Events about the war in particular. And the Dragon of the West had apparently laid siege to the Great Earth Kingdom capital of Ba Sing Se for 600 days, a city that had so far been untouched in the war. Iroh then punched the air and a fireball that was easily that size of a Gukakyo came, flying at Kakashi. Iroh knew that in this battle, he couldn't hold back. With Naruto and Zuko threw a fireball at Naruto, but said Blonde blocked it with a shield of air before he punched the air and sent a strong blast of wind at the prince, but said Prince managed to dodge the blast of air and threw another fireball at the blonde. Naruto dodged the ball of heated oxygen before making his favorite hand sign. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Suddenly, to Zuko's shock, 4 other Narutos appeared and they all charged at the prince. How'd he, Zuko wondered, but before he had any more time to think, the 5 Narutos had surrounded him and they all sent waves of wind at him, and he was sent up into the air as all of the waves of wind hit him before he fell back down on the ground with a thud. With Kakashi and Iroh, Kakashi dodged a fireball before weaving a series of hand signs. Raiden. Jabashi. Kakashi said, and a wave of electricity suddenly flew from his hands and headed straight for Iroh, but the retired general held out his right arm with the index and middle finger extended and let the wave hit him. He then directed the electricity through his body and shot it out through his left hand. I've never seen anything like these techniques that he's using. And what's with those eyes of his? It looks like I've got to use that technique, Iroh thought before his entire body was suddenly engulfed in fire. You should feel honored, you're the second person to have forced me to use my most powerful technique. His most powerful technique? This could be bad, Kakashi said before turning to the others and saying, you 5 should get out of here now. This is your end. Dragon of the West, Iroh said, and he charged at Kakashi as a dragon of fire appeared around him before he delivered a barrage of punches and kicks. Kakashi was sent skidding backwards and Iroh finished of his attacks with a powerful blast of fire from his mouth. The blast of fire was stopped however as Aang landed in front of Kakashi, rotating his glider to use it as a shield from the fire. So the avatars finally decided to show himself? Iroh asked as Aang looked around at the burning village with a sad expression on his face. Look what I've brought to this place, Aang said, more to himself. You could always leave. Aang then looked towards Iroh. If you left the island, we would leave too, to follow you. Kakashi.san. Go get the others, I'll call Appa, Aang said. With Sokka and Suki after leaving Kakashi's side, Sasuke, Sakura, Katara, Sokka and Suki had broken off. Sakura and Katara were helping the civilians to safety, and Sasuke, Sokka and Suki were fighting the fire nation forces. Though right now, Sokka and Suki were hiding behind a building. Suki remarked, "There's no time to say goodbye." Sokka asked, "What about saying, 'I'm sorry,' for what?" inquired Suki. "I treated you like a girl when I should have treated you like a warrior," Sokka replied. Suki stood up and said, "Now get out of here, we'll hold them off." She then ran towards the battle as Sokka got up and fled. "I am a warrior," Suki said before kissing Sokka on the cheek, "but I'm a girl too." Appa landed as he turned the corner, and Momo, Sakura, Katara, and Aang were already on him. Then, after Suki had urged him to leave, Sasuke turned the corner, and as Kakashi emerged via Shunshin, he ascended on Appa's back. Sakura questioned, "Huh? Kakashi? Sensei? Where's Naruto?" Just before the blonde avatar ran with the Fire Prince at his heels, Kakashi said, "He's coming." Before he punched the air and launched a fireball directly at Naruto, Zuko yelled, "I'm not letting you get away." The blonde leapt into the air and kicked with his right foot, sending a wave of wind down at Zuko and causing the prince to stumble. Aang exclaimed, "Appa! Yip dot yip!" As the sky bison flew into the air and Naruto landed in the saddle. Then, as some of his men approached, Zuko stood up. "Prince Zuko! Sama!" exclaimed one of them. Zuko ran past them and headed for the ship, shouting, "Get back to the ship! Don't lose sight of them," during his run. With the group of avatars Aang was in charge, Katara and Sakura were seated in the front of the saddle, and Kakashi had picked up his book and begun reading as Appa flew away from the island. Naruto, Sokka, and Sasuke looked down towards the burning village. "I didn't think we'd encounter the fire nation so early. I just wish there's more we could have done," said Naruto. "This is war, Naruto. We were lucky that no one died this time, but we can't guarantee that next time," Sasuke replied. Katara began, "I know it's hard, but you did the right thing. Zuko would have destroyed the whole place if we stayed. They're gonna be okay, Aang.kun." Aang then turned to face Kakashi. "Kakashi-san, do you have any water techniques that you can use to put out the fires?" he inquired. Kakashi put down his book and said, "Well, now that you mention it, before making the hand signals, Suiryuden no Jutsu." After emerging from the ocean, a water-shaped dragon swept across the village, extinguishing every fire. As they flew into the sunset, Naruto, Sakura, Aang, Katara, and Sokka each said, "Sugoi, amazing." The group ascended a hill with 2 air benders, 2 water benders, 3 non-benders, and 2 animals. As he stood in front of the others, Aang exclaimed, "The Earth Kingdom city of Omashu." They all turned to face a city that appeared to have been carved out of a mountain. The bald avatar remarked, "I used to always come here to visit my friend Bumi.san. Wow. We don't have cities like this on the South Pole," Katara replied. Sokka remarked, "They have buildings here that don't melt." Sakura remarked, "This is nothing like Konoha." Naruto simply nodded in agreement. Aang exclaimed, "Well, let's go, slowpokes. The real fun is inside the city," before leaping into the air and settling slightly lower on the hill to land. "Wait, Aang.san. It could be dangerous if people find out you're the Avatar," said Kakashi. Sokka said, "You'll need a disguise." Aang sarcastically questioned, "So, what am I supposed to do? Grow a mustache?" Later on, he had developed a mustache. Well, it was just Appa's fur, and he wore a bunch of it on his head to conceal the arrow. After scratching his head through the fur and complaining, "Oh, this is so itchy," Aang turned to Appa and inquired, "How do you live in this stuff?" "The sky." Bison simply snorted at him. "Great. Now you look just like my grandfather," Sokka replied. Katara said, "Technically, Aang.kun is 112 years old." Aang then kicked up his glider and grabbed it to use as a trekking stick. Before he left like an elderly man, he said, "Now let's get to skippin' young whipper snappers. The big city awaits." Gates and Omashu as they made their way up the path to the main gate of the city, Aang exclaimed, "You guys are going to love Omashu. The people here are the friendliest in the world." A guard at the gate questioned, "Rotten cabbages? What kind of slum do you think this is? Before smashing a cabbage he was holding and removing 2 more from a man's hands, whom I will now call the cabbage man. When the guard stomped his foot on the ground leading to a cart of cabbages, a rock erupted out of the ground, sending the cart skyward and then plummeting into the abyss that surrounded the city. The wagon struck the bottom, and the cabbage man shouted, "No my cabbages," as the group peered over the edge. The others followed Aang as he smiled and walked toward the guards, saying, "Just keep smiling." But as they got closer, one of the guards raised his arm, and a big rock emerged from the earth, hovering over Aang's head. The guard yelled, "State your business," but Aang rushed up to him. As the boulder hit the ground, Aang exclaimed, "My business is my business, young man, and none of yours. I gotta have a mind to bend you over my knee and paddle your backside. Kurama no Kyubi." I believe he said that, or at least that's how it sounded. I could be mistaken, though. Let me know if I'm mistaken. The guard said, "Settle down, old timer. Just tell me who you are." Aang pointed to Kakashi at the end and said, "Name's Bonzu Pippinpaddle Opsicopoulos III, and these are my son and grandkids." Katara then approached. She said, "Hello, Jun Pippinpaddle Opsicopoulos. It's nice to meet you." The guard signaled her. Before pointing them in the direction of the gate, the guard exclaimed, "You seem like a responsible young lady. See that your grandfather stays out of trouble. Enjoy Omashu." And they passed him. Sakura walked past the guards and said, "We will." The guard put his hand on Sasuke's shoulder as he passed him and exclaimed, "Wait a minute." He then turned Sasuke around and said, "You're a strong young boy. Show some respect for the elderly and carry your grandfather's bag." Naruto laughed in the background as Aang tossed the bag at the Uchiha, saying, "Good idea." The guard pointed to Naruto and exclaimed, "And you, watch out for that lemur." Momo was sitting on Naruto's shoulder when he said, "Yes, sir." After that, they proceeded to the big gate, or rather, the wall, which appeared to open up on its own as earth. Benders bent it open, allowing the group to enter as the walls closed behind them. The group continued walking a short distance before pausing to gaze in wonder at the Omashu delivery system in front of them. This is the Omashu delivery system. Miles and miles of tubes and chutes. Earth. Bending brings the packages up and gravity brings them down, Aang replied. Sokka said drearily, "Great, so they get their mail on time." Reflecting on his visit a century ago, Aang remarked, "They do get their mail on time. But my friend Bumi.san found a better use for these chutes." Rewind before Aang approached from behind, Bumi surveyed the city and swiftly turned around. He said, "Look around you, what do you see?" Aang stepped forward and said, The mail system?" "Instead of seeing what they want you to see, you gotta open your brain to the possibilities," Bumi stated. Aang speculated, "A package sending system? The greatest super slide in the world," exclaimed Bumi. Aang said, "Bumi.san, you're a mad genius." Bumi burst out laughing like a nerd. Later they were in a cart sliding down one of the chutes. The end of the flashback, Kurama no Kyubi. This is the scene that, in my opinion, is the best in the entire episode. In a cart with Momo perched on Naruto's head, Aang, Katara, and Naruto prepared to descend the slide, and remarked, "One ride, then we're off to the north pole. Air. Bender's honor." Naruto turned to face the others and said, "Hey, sure that you guys don't want to come?" "No thanks. Besides, there's only room for 3 in that thing," Sokka replied. "Oh, yeah," exclaimed Naruto. With an eye smile, Kakashi said, "Have fun, you 3. "We will," exclaimed Aang. As they started down the slide, Katara remarked, "It sounded like fun at first, but now that I'm here, I'm starting to have second thoughts." They descended the chute for a short distance before coming up beside another one with a cart containing sharp spears. Additionally, because Aang, Katara, Naruto, and Momo were carrying a heavier cart, they outpaced the one with the spears until the 2 chutes joined and the spears began to follow, gradually catching up to them. Naruto ducked to avoid being impaled when the spears appeared just behind them. Aang declared, "I'm on it." He then succeeded in removing the cart from the chute, and they immediately descended at one of the houses before gliding off the building and down the roof in the direction of a troop of Earth Kingdom soldiers. The soldiers' captain remarked, Men, you'll be going off to combat soon and it's important that you'd be prepared for anything. Just before the cart carrying Aang, Katara, Naruto, and Momo passed through. Next, they approached a wall that appeared to have some carts traveling on a rail system. They leapt straight through it, causing one of the carts to fall and another to collide with it. After landing in another chute, the cart that contained Momo, Katara, and the avatars slid down it. Katara shouted, "Aang.Kun, do something, use your air bending." Aang said, "Yeah, good idea. That'll make us go even faster," and then swung his arms to send tiny wind gusts off to the sides of the cart, which accelerated their speed. Naruto exclaimed, "Hey, let me help, Datbayo," before turning around and launching a gust of wind to accelerate them further. Another cart came to a stop in front of an earth bender a little further down, and the three screamed because it seemed like they were going straight for the cart. The three sighed in relief as the earth bender used earth bending to send the cart away, but then a second cart emerged from the ground and landed in front of the earth bender. The three screamed before colliding with the second cart and falling to the ground. After that, Naruto slightly bent the air, causing the cart to pass beneath them. They landed inside it, then descended and touched down on one of the roofs. After slipping down the roof, they landed on another roof and then slid down that one. A man was working on a vase inside a nearby house, and it appeared that he was almost done when the cart carrying the three humans and one lemur. Bat entered through the window, struck the vase, destroyed it, and left the man in a state of confusion. Before they descended onto a roof and entered a building, Aang yelled, "Sorry." When they emerged, Naruto had a cat and Momo fighting around his head until Momo was able to push the cat away. After that, the cart went in the direction of a ramp, but instead of climbing it and leaping over the street below, they fell through it and landed directly on top of the cabbage man's cart. Before some guards arrived, the man yelled, "My cabbages, you're gonna pay for this." Aang sat up nervously and said, "2 cabbages please." The audience hall at Omashu Castle. They were led by the guards into Omashu's castle's audience hall, where the king was seated comfortably on his throne and arched an eyebrow at Aang. "Your Majesty, these juveniles were arrested for vandalism, traveling under false pretenses and malicious destruction of cabbages," the guard replied. The cabbage man said, "With their heads, 1 for each head of cabbage." Before turning to face the king, the guard exclaimed, "Silence! Only the king can cast down judgment. What is your judgment, sire?" The king then turned to face each of them individually, first Naruto, then Katara, and lastly Aang. They readied themselves for the worst when he began, saying, "Throw them, a feast." They were seated at the end of a long table shortly after, with a larger chair across from them. The king stood behind them and picked up the chicken on Aang's plate, saying, "Heh heh heh. The people in my city have gotten fat from too many feasts. So I hope you like your chicken with no skin." The king turned to face Naruto as Aang said, "Thanks, but I don't eat meat." Before shoving the chicken into Naruto's mouth and leaving as Naruto began to eat it, he said, "How about you? I bet you like meat." "Is it just me, or is this guy's crown a little crooked?" Katara inquired. The king sat down and said, "So, tell me young bald one, where are you from?" Aang exclaimed, "I'm from Kangaroo Island." Before they heard someone laughing from the door, the king remarked, Kangaroo Island, eh? I hear that place is really hoppy." They turned to see some guards escorting Kakashi, Sasuke, Sokka, and Sakura. As the others stared at him, Sokka remarked, "What? It was pretty funny." One of the guards remarked, "Your Majesty, these 4 are friends of those 3 over there." The king said, "More guests? Well, I'm starting to get too tired for guests now. Guess it's time to hit the hay." Then, he pulled a chicken out of his sleeve and threw it at Aang, who surprised the guards by stopping it in time with his air bending. The king stood up and exclaimed, "There's an air bender in our presence, and not just any air bender, the Avatar." Aang instantly stopped bending the air, causing the chicken to fall onto his plate, and the king sat down again. The king asked, "Now, what do you have to say for yourself, Pippinpaddle, Opsicopoulos.san?" And Aang got to his feet. He looked under the table and said, "Okay, you caught me. I'm the Avatar. Doing my Avatar thing, keeping the world safe." He then put his hands on Katara and Naruto's shoulders and pulled them closer to him, saying, "Love each other. Respect all life." They then walked backward towards the other guards at the door and said, "And don't run with your spears. We'll see you next time." However, as they got close to the two guards, they stopped themselves by bringing their spears into an X shape over the door. Naruto exclaimed, "You can't keep us here, Dabeo." Sakura exclaimed, "Yeah, that's right. Let us leave." Before he picked up a leaf and began to eat it, the king said, "Let us leave." Sokka whispered to the others, "This guy is nuts, and we're in serious trouble. Tomorrow, the Avatar will face 3 deadly challenges, but for now, the guards will show you to your chamber," the monarch replied. A guard standing beside the king said, "My liege, do you mean the good chamber or the bad chamber?" The king exclaimed, "The newly refurbished chamber." The king grinned when the guard said, "Wait, which one are we talking about?" The king turned to the guards who were accompanying the group and said, "Take them to the refurbished chamber that was once bad, the one that used to be the bad chamber, until the recent refurbishing that is. Of course we've been calling it the new chamber, but we really should number them. The renovated room that used to be awful before Aang, Naruto, Katara, Sakura, Sokka, Sasuke, Momo, and Kakashi were flung in, the chamber's wall opened. Sakura remarked, "This is a prison cell, but it's so nice." As Momo leapt off Naruto's head and landed on a bed, Aang remarked, "He did say it was newly refurbished." She then began eating an apple. Sokka declared, "Nice or not, we're prisoners. I wonder what these challenges are gonna be," Aang replied. Before Naruto saw something, Katara remarked, "We're not sticking around to find out, there's got to be some way out of here." The air. Vents, he hurled, gesturing to the air, vents. "If you think we're gonna fit through there, you're crazier than that king," Sasuke replied. Naruto pointed to the lemur, who was licking a partially consumed apple because his stomach had grown quite large from all the food he had consumed, and he said, "We can't, but Momo can." The blonde avatar approached the lemur and said, "Momo, I need you to find Appa and bust us out of here." He then lifted him up and tried to push him through the vents, but the lemur.bat had simply become too fat. "Go on boy, get Appa." Since Momo wouldn't fit, Naruto simply gave up. Sokka questioned, "How is Appa supposed to save us anyway?" In Naruto's place, Aang responded, "Appa is a 10-ton sky bison. I think he could figure something out." As Katara climbed into one of the room's 6 beds, Aang moved to another, and Naruto approached a third. "Well, no point arguing about it now. Get some rest, Aang.kun. Looks like you'll need it for tomorrow." Kakashi was the only one who chose not to go to bed. He was oddly satisfied with simply dozing off while seated in a chair. Later, while Aang was asleep, the young avatar woke up when the wall opened. "Where are my friends?" he asked, not seeing the others, and turning around, he saw a guard. Naruto.san. Sokka.san. Katara.chan. Sakura.san. Sasuke.san. Kakashi.san. The guard said, "If you finish your challenges, the king will release them." Anxiously, Aang questioned, "And if I fail?" Before extending his hand, the guard said, "He didn't say. Your staff, please?" he asked. Aang was then led to the audience chamber after kicking the staff off the ground and tossing it to the guard. Chamber of Audience. The king asked, "First Avatar, what do you think of my new outfit? I want your honest opinion." He was wearing purple clothing instead of the Earth Kingdom's customary green attire. And after waiting for a response for a few seconds, he declared, "I'm waiting." Aang remarked, "I guess it's fine." The king declared, "Great, you've passed the first test." "Really?" inquired Aang. The king exclaimed, "Well, not one of the deadly tests. The real challenges are much more challenging." Before Aang rushed toward him, causing some gentle air gusts. "I don't have time for your crazy games. Give me my friends back, we're leaving," he screamed. As the wall opened up and some guards placed strange crystalline rings on Naruto, Katara, Sakura, Sokka, Sasuke, and Kakashi, the king said, "Oh? I thought you might refuse, so I will give your friends some special souvenirs. Those delightful rings are made of pure genomite, also known as creeping crystal. It's a crystal that grows remarkably fast. By nightfall your friends will be completely covered in it. Terrible fate really." I can stop it, but only if you cooperate. Sokka's ring began to grow. He exclaimed, "Ah! It's already creeping." The king grinned when Aang said, "I'll do as you want." The cave beneath the castle. They found themselves in a cave beneath the castle shortly after. Aang was standing on a platform overlooking a sea of stalagmites that covered the entire cave, while the king, Naruto, Katara, Sakura, Sokka, Sasuke, Kakashi, and a few guards were standing on a balcony. There was a waterfall with a ladder inside the cave's center, and a key dangling from a chain above the ladder. After a brief chuckle, the king glanced over his shoulder to see that the crystals had covered the hands of Naruto, Katara, Sakura, Sokka, and Sasuke and were getting close to their elbows. However, he raised an eyebrow when he noticed that Kakashi's ring hadn't even begun to creep yet. Before pointing to the key in the waterfall and saying, "Oh, there it is. Would you mind fetching it for me?" the king remarked, "It seems I have lost my lunchbox key and I'm hungry." After that, Aang began leaping from stalagmite to stalagmite until he finally arrived at the waterfall. He leapt up into the cascade and snatched up the ladder. Before Aang lost his hold and fell in the direction of the stalagmites, the king remarked mockingly, "Ooh! Climbing the ladder. No one's thought of that before." However, he managed to stop his fall by extending his arms and legs as he came down between two stalagmites, and he barely avoided being stabbed in the crotch by a third one. He then leapt from stalagmite to stalagmite upward until he passed between two hanging stalagmites. He then leapt down and used air bending to propel himself forward before plunging into the waterfall. Once more, the waterfall threw him out and sent him flying, but this time, he was thrown straight into a stalagmite, and he was able to grab it as he fell. Before Aang broke off the top of the stalagmite and stood up where it had been before throwing it through the waterfall with a little air bending, the king said, "That's right, keep diving head.in. I'm sure it'll work eventually." It took the key and some of the chain with it before hitting the wall just above the king, and the key was now hanging over him. "There, enjoy your lunch, I want my friends back, now," Aang screamed. "Oh. Not yet, I need help with a little other matter. It seems, I've lost my pet, Flopsy," the monarch replied. The playground of Flopsy. Aang descended after spotting a rabbit perched on a rock, assuming it was Flopsy. "Okay. I found him," Aang exclaimed, turning to face the other people. The king exclaimed, "Bring him to me. Daddy wants a kiss from Flopsy." Just before a big goat gorilla landed behind him, Aang said, "Come here, Flopsy." He looked anxiously over his shoulder as the rabbit leapt away. Then, as Aang leapt to avoid being crushed, the goat gorilla slammed his hands together, crushing the rock the rabbit had been standing on instead. The rabbit was running for its life behind Aang when he landed on the ground, and the young avatar turned around and chased after it while shouting, "Flopsy! Wait, Flopsy!" The king then laughed and the goat gorilla ran after them. Aang shouted, "Flopsy!" as he followed the rabbit as it made a swift turn, and the goat gorilla followed the two. Aang attempted to reach for the rabbit as it ran through a tiny hole, but it was ineffective. Then, as he stood up and said, "Flopsy," he noticed something and turned to face the goat gorilla. The big animal abruptly stopped in front of him, then lifted him in his arms and licked him. Aang yelled, "Flopsy," before stroking the goat gorilla. When the king whistled, Flopsy rushed over to him, climbed to his position, and then rolled onto his back. The king began massaging Flopsy's belly and remarked, "Ooh. That's a good boy, yes. Oh, that is some belly. Guys, are you okay?" Aang approached the group of people standing there. Katara's crystal had grown to the point where it resembled a dress. "Other than the crystal, slowly encasing my entire body. Doing great," she exclaimed. In contrast, Sokka's crystal had a more asymmetrical shape, and it suddenly grew slightly larger on his left side, causing him to topple over. However, Kakashi's crystal had only expanded to cover his finger. Kakashi shrugged when Naruto said, "Hey, Kakashi. Sensei. How come your crystal hasn't grown that much?" "The crystal is of the earth element, I'm able to fight it back, using my Raiden chakra. Though I'm starting to run low," Kakashi stated. Before Aang approached them, the king rubbed Flopsy's stomach and said, "Oh, yes." The young air bender exclaimed, "Come on. I'm ready for the next challenge," and the king grinned. The arena now they found themselves in what looked like a huge arena. Aang and the king stood in the center of one of the three balconies, while Naruto, Sasuke, Sakura, and another guard stood on the one to their right, and Katara, Sokka, Kakashi, and a guard stood on the one to their left. Just before two gladiator-like warriors emerged from the door, the king declared, "Your final test is a duel. And as a special treat, you may choose your opponent." Point to choose. "So, you're saying whoever I point to, that's the person I get to fight?" Aang responded. The king cautioned him to make a wise choice. "I choose you," Aang exclaimed, gesturing to the prince. The king exclaimed, "Hum. Wrong choice," before removing his robe to reveal an unexpectedly muscular body. A tiny rock erupted, sending the avatar hurtling down to the arena, and the king leapt after him as he stomped the ground and cracks appeared, heading towards Aang. The king exclaimed, "You thought I was a frail old man, but I'm the most powerful earth bender you'll ever see," before Aang stood up. "Can I fight the guy with the axe instead?" he inquired. Before pointing up at the guard who was standing with Katara and Sokka, the king declared, "There are no take-backs in my kingdom. You might need this." Then, just before the king bent a boulder out of the ground and hurled it at him, the guard threw the glider down to Aang, who caught it. After avoiding it, Aang jumped over a third boulder and avoided a second. Before he stomped the ground and a boulder appeared, the king exclaimed, "Typical air bender tactic, avoid and evade. I'd hoped the avatar would be less predictable." Aang quickly leapt over the boulder and used his glider, which functions similarly to a helicopter's propel, to slowly fly in the direction of the king. The king said, "Don't you have any surprises for me? Sooner or later you'll have to strike back," and then crushed the earth, causing another boulder to rise. The bald monk then fell to the ground, and as he struck the ground, the glider bounced away. He then leapt into the air, kicked the boulder with both feet, and sent it into the ceiling, causing several small rocks to fall on Aang. Aang then stood up and began to run in the direction of the king, but as he was moving back and forth, a stalagmite erupted out of the ground and nearly struck Aang. Another stalagmite appeared as Aang attempted to run farther, followed by a third and a fourth, but the fifth one emerged from beneath him, dragging him along with it. As Aang descended from the top of the stalagmite on his air scooter, the king exclaimed, "Oh, you'll have to be a little more creative than that." He then made his way directly to the king, who launched another stalagmite. Aang sidestepped it and hovered along the wall before making his way back to the king. He swung his arm, sending a gust of wind in the king's direction, who then created a wall of earth to shield him from the wind. The king protruded his head from behind the wall and asked, "Did someone leave the windows open? It feels a little drafty in here. Are you hoping I'll catch a cold?" he asked. As the king kicked down the wall and landed on it, Aang fell to the ground. The king then threw a lot of dirt at Aang, who tried to jump over it but was knocked back. Aang leapt back, planted his feet on the wall, and then kicked off and shot himself in the direction of his glider as the king punched the ground, causing tiny stalagmites to burst from the ground towards him. He picked up the glider and rolled it over as he landed. The king asked, "How are you going to get me from way over there?" before Aang began to run. The king then swung his foot forward on the ground, turning the surrounding ground into mud and trapping the young avatar. In an effort to crush Aang, the king then used earth bending to lift two large rocks into the air and cause them to shoot in the direction of one another. However, the avatar used air bending to blow the mud away from him, and the rocks collided before Aang abruptly rose and landed on the ground as he swiped the glider downwards, hitting the king with a crescent-shaped wave of air that blew him back into the wall. The king then sent the rocks flying in Aang's direction, but the air bender barely made it over them and landed on the ground as the rocks continued toward the king, who used his left arm to defend himself before tearing off a section of the wall with earth bending. Aang then began to run in circles, creating a tornado, which the king threw back, but when he clapped his hands, the wall split in two, and the king opened his eyes to see Aang descend in front of him, pointing the glider at him while raising his arms in surrender. Aang looked up to see a huge boulder after a tiny stone fell on his head. Before tossing the boulder aside and plunging into the ground, the king exclaimed, "Heh heh. Well done, Avatar. You fight with much fire in your heart." He then emerged onto the balcony, where the others were now standing, and Aang rose using his glider. "You've passed all my tests. Now, You must answer one question, the monarch replied. That's not fair. You said you would release my friends if I finish your tests, Aang responded. Oh, but what's the point of tests if you don't learn anything, the monarch replied. Oh, come on, exclaimed Naruto. The king said, answer this one question and I will set your friends free. What is my name? Before turning to face the others. From the looks of your friends, he said, observing Kakashi, who had only his right hand covered in crystal, well, most of them. As he turned to leave, he turned to face Aang and said, I'd say you only have a few minutes. Aang questioned, how am I supposed to know his name? Think about the challenges. First you got that key from within the waterfall, then you found his pet and finally you fought him. Maybe there's some kind of hidden message. Kakashi responded. I got it, cried Sokka. Yeah? Inquired Aang. He's an earth bender, right? Rocky, you know, because of all the rocks, Sokka replied. We're gonna keep trying, but that is a good back up, Katara stated. Okay, so back to the challenges. I got a key from the waterfall, I saved his pet, and I had a duel, Aang replied. Katara inquired, and what did you learn? Well, everything was different than I expected, Aang replied. Sakura said, and, just before her crystal began to swell a little. Aang realized who the king was and exclaimed, I know his name. Well, they weren't straightforward. To solve each test, I had to think differently than I normally would. Chamber of Audience. Aang stood in front of the king in the audience chamber and said, I solved the question the same way I solved the challenges. As you said a long time ago, I had to open my brain to the possibilities. The king laughed and said, Bumi.san, you're a mad genius. Aang then rushed over and gave his longtime friend a hug. Before the others arrived, the king, who was now known as Bumi, said, Oh, Aang. It's good to see you. You haven't changed a bit, literally. A little help over here, Katara exclaimed, revealing only her face. When Naruto exclaimed, a little help, Bumi caused the crystals to burst off, and he took a fragment of one of them. He took a bite of it and said, delicious. Genomite is made of rock candy. Sakura inquired, so this crazy king is your old friend Bumi? Bumi retorted, who are you calling old? Okay, I'm old. Why did you do all this instead of just telling Aang.san who you were? Sokka inquired. First of all, it's pretty fun messing with people. Bumi then laughed, but I do have a reason. He then glanced at Aang. Aang, you have a difficult task ahead. The world has changed in the 100 years you've been gone. It's the duty of the Avatar to restore balance to the world by defeating fire. Lord Ozai. You have much to learn. You must master the 4 elements and confront the fire. Lord, and when you do, I hope you will think like a mad genius. He then laughed before bowing to Aang. And it looks like you're in good hands. You'll need your friends to help you defeat the fire. Nation. Momo followed by Naruto's shoulder, and you'll need Momo too. Thank you for your wisdom, but before we leave, I have a challenge for you, Aang replied. Aang and Bumi were riding a cart down one of the chutes shortly after, and they eventually collided with a cabbage cart. My cabbages! Exclaimed the cabbage man. Everyone in the group was waiting for Sokka, Kakashi, and Momo to bring back some food while they were in a forest. When they got back, Naruto cried out, finally, as Sokka sat down and set down a pouch. Aang inquired, what's for dinner? We've got a few options, Sokka said, then took a nut out of the pouch. First, round nuts. And some kind of oval shaped nuts. And some rock shaped nuts. He then took out a small rock and remarked, that might just be rocks. He threw the rock at Momo, who looked down at it. Sokka urged them to dig in. Sakura inquired, seriously, what else do you have? And Sokka examined the pouch. Thinking it was a nut, Momo picked up the rock and repeatedly struck it against a boulder before he held it over his head and slammed it down. But there was a loud boom just as it struck. Before Momo threw the rock onto the boulder, Sakura questioned, what was that? Then there was a louder boom, and the lemur bat leapt away. Sasuke pointed to the direction it was coming from before he and the others, with the exception of Sokka, Appa, and Momo, ran in its direction. It's coming from over there. Before Momo took off after them, Sokka screamed, shouldn't we run away from huge booms, not toward them? Standing behind a downed tree, They watched as a boy dressed in traditional Earth Kingdom garb used Earth bending to lift up a boulder before slamming it into a wall. An Earth bender, exclaimed Sakura. Aang exclaimed, let's go meet him. He looks dangerous, so we better approach cautiously, Sokka replied. After moving a bit closer to the boy, Katara said, hello there, I'm Katara, what's your name? After using Earth bending to raise another boulder, the boy dropped it when he saw Katara and fled, blocking the way with multiple Earth bending rocks. Nice to meet you, Datbeo, exclaimed Naruto as he approached Katara with the others. Katara said, I just wanted to say hi. He's got to be running somewhere. There's probably a village near here, Kakashi replied. Aang said, and I'll bet that village has a market. After saying, which means no nuts for dinner, Katara, Aang, Naruto, Sakura, and Sasuke fled. As he and Kakashi followed the others, Sokka exclaimed, hey, I worked hard to get those nuts. Before Momo swooped over him and made the noises that are his way of saying, yeah, I hate them too. Earth Kingdom Marketplace and Village. Before Katara and Sakura saw the boy from earlier entering a nearby house, Aang said, great hat, I'll trade you some nuts for it, after purchasing a Chinese style hat from a man in the market. Before the two girls followed him and attracted the attention of the others, Katara said, hey. Within the shop the boy approached a table at the end of the room and said, hi, Mom. His mother was seated on the other side of the table. As Katara opened the door, the boy's mother said, where have you been, Haru? You're late. Get started on your chores. Haru turned around in shock and she said, hey, you're that kid. Why did you run away before? You must have me confused with some other kid, Haru replied. Naruto exclaimed, no, she doesn't. We saw you Earth bending. Datbeo. Haru gasped before his mother shut the window and door. She turned to face Haru and said, they saw you doing what? The group examined their attire after Haru remarked, they're crazy, Mom. I mean, look at how they're dressed. Just as Haru's mother was saying, you know how dangerous that is. You know what would happen if they caught you Earth bending. They heard a knock on the door. The person at the door shouted, open up. Sokka went to the window to see who it was, and he saw soldiers from Fire Nation. He muttered, Fire Nation, act natural. Before Haru's mother opened the door and the Fire Nation soldiers' captain entered, surveying the space. Haru was standing in front of Sokka, who was standing by the table with an apple in his hand, as if they were discussing it. With a bowl of cherries in her hand and several in her mouth, Katara stood in the center of the room. Aang watched as Naruto and Sasuke engaged in arm wrestling on a barrel. Finally, Sakura performed a quick henge to change into the apple that Sokka was holding while Kakashi was reading his porn in the back of the room. Kurama no Kyuubi. Is that natural in any way? Oh, and what if Sokka bit into that apple? Haru's mother said, what do you want? I've already paid you this week. As he started a fire in his hands and put it out, the Fire Nation soldier remarked, tax just doubled. And we wouldn't want an accident, would we? Fire is sometimes so hard to control. After finding a small box that resembled a chest, Haru's mother opened it to find some Earth Kingdom currency, which she then gave to the soldier. As he was leaving, the man dropped the copper coins on the ground and said, you can keep the copper ones. Naruto exclaimed, well, he's nice, while Haru's mother collected the coins. As Haru's mother got to her feet, Kakashi inquired, how long has the Fire Nation been here? 5 years. Fire Lord Ozai uses our town's coal mines to fuel his ships, she replied. They're thugs, they steal from us, and everyone here is too much of a coward to do anything about it, Haru exclaimed. Haru's mother urged him to stop talking like that. Sakura remarked, but Haru sans an Earth bender, he can help. Earth bending is forbidden. It's caused nothing but misery for this village. He must never use his abilities, Haru's mom said. How can you say that? Haru.san has a gift. Asking him not to Earth bend is like asking me not to water bend. It's a part of who we are, Katara replied. Haru's mother said, you don't understand. I understand that Haru.san can help you fight back. What can the Fire Nation do to you that they haven't done already? Katara responded. Haru's mother remarked, "They could take Haru away. Like they took his father." Katara turned to face Haru, who simply averted his gaze and closed his eyes. Hut in the mountains. Haru led them to a circular hut with a dome-shaped roof and remarked, "My mom said you could sleep here tonight, but you should leave in the morning." When Appa had a bunch of hay in his mouth and had stopped chewing on it to look at them, Aang said, "Thanks, I'll make sure Appa doesn't eat all your hay." Katara and Haru were strolling along a forest road outside the hut. "I'm sorry about what I said earlier. I didn't know about your father," Katara replied. "That's okay. It's funny. The way you were talking back in the store, it reminded me of him," Haru replied. "Thanks," said Katara. "My father was very courageous. When the Fire Nation invaded, he and the other Earth Benders were outnumbered 10-to-1, but they fought back anyway," Haru continued. As they emerged from the forest and reached a cliff, Katara remarked, "He sounds like a great man." Haru squatted on the cliff and remarked, "They rounded up my father and every other Earth Bender, and took them away. We haven't seen them since." Katara remarked, "So that's why you hide your Earth Bending?" "Yeah." Haru dropped the stones into his hand before clenching his hand over them and crushing the 2 stones to dust. "He taught me everything I know," he said, pointing at her necklace as he lifted up to the stones and began rotating them over his right hand with Earth Bending. "The problem is, the only way I can feel close to my father now is when I practice my bending." Katara remarked, "See this necklace? My mother gave it to me." Haru said, "It's beautiful. I lost my mom in a Fire Nation raid. This necklace is all I have left of her," Katara replied. Haru questioned, "It's not enough, is it?" "No," exclaimed Katara. In the vicinity of the mines they were still walking when a nearby mine abruptly collapsed. Someone shouted, help," toward them. Haru exclaimed, "The mine," as he and Katara dashed in its direction. When he saw the two, an elderly man who was stuck beneath some rocks exclaimed, "Help me." They made an unsuccessful attempt to remove him. At Haru, Katara screamed, "It's not working, we have to get help." The Earth Bender exclaimed, "There's no time, pull harder." Katara remarked, "There's a way you can help him, Haru.san." "I can't," Haru began. Katara exclaimed, "Please, there's no one around to see you. It's the only way." Haru then moved away from the mine, assumed an Earth Bending position, and hurled all of the rocks into it. Katara exclaimed, "Haru.san, you did it," as Haru approached them, assisted the elderly man in standing up, and then drove him back to the village hut in the mountains. It was so brave of Haru.san to use his Earth Bending to help that old man, Katara replied. Naruto remarked, "You must have really inspired him." "I guess so," Katara exclaimed. "Everyone should get some sleep, we're leaving at dawn," Sokka stated. Sakura said, "Dawn? Can't we sleep in for once?" "I'm afraid not. There's Fire Nation soldiers throughout this village. If they find us, it would be bad," Kakashi responded. Sokka said, "Exactly, now good night." Outside, when the Fire Nation soldiers approached Haru's house and knocked on the door, Haru opened it. The old man, who had arrived with the Fire Nation soldiers, exclaimed, "That's him. That's the Earth Bender." The soldiers' captain shoved him away before seizing Haru. The following day after leaving the hut, Sakura went to the spring to fetch some water, which she then bent before pouring it into a vase. After that, she knelt down and picked up the vase, but as she got to her feet, she saw Haru's mother standing there, gazing over the horizon. With tears streaming down her face, she turned around and realized what had happened, and Sakura dropped the vase. When she entered the hut, she exclaimed, "They took him. They took Haru.san away." "Nani?" inquired Naruto. Sakura exclaimed, "The old man turned him into the Fire Nation." "Ah. This is all my fault. I forced him into Earth Bending," Katara replied. Sokka inquired, "When did this happen?" Haru-san's mother said they came for him at midnight, Sakura stated. "Then it's too late to track him. He's long gone," Sokka replied. Everyone stared at Kakashi as he bit his thumb and performed a series of hand signals before slamming his palm down on the ground and exclaiming, "Kachiyose no jutsu." When he said, "Not necessarily," there was not even a puff of smoke. I suppose since we're in the past, I don't have that summoning contract yet. And everyone started to perspire. We don't need to track him. The Fire Nation is going to take me right to Haru.san, Katara replied. Aang questioned, and why would they do that? As the others exchanged glances, Katara remarked, because they're going to arrest me for earth bending. Sakura exclaimed, in that case I'll go too. Katara replied, you will? Well, thanks. In the vicinity of the mines as he and Sasuke pushed a boulder over a ventilation shaft, Sokka remarked, I thought you were crazy at first, Katara. I'm Odo, but this might work. There are ventilation shafts throughout these mines. All Naruto.san has to do is send an air current from that vent to this one right here. The boulder levitates and ta-da-da, fake earth bending. Sakura said, Naruto, did you get all that? Aang was sitting next to Naruto, playing with a butterfly, when he said, sure, I got it. Sokka asked, do you remember your cue? Yeah, exclaimed Naruto. They're here, exclaimed Kakashi, sitting on the side of the mountain wall, as he turned a page in his book. As Sakura and Sokka collided, Sokka yelled, get in your places, and 3 Fire Nation soldiers arrived. Sokka shouted, get out of my way, Pipsqueak. Sakura screamed, how dare you call me Pipsqueak, you giant-eared freak. Sokka shouted, what did you call me? A giant-eared freak? Look at those things, do herds of animals use them for shade? Sakura screamed. Sokka shouted, you better back off, and then muttered, really, back off? I will not back off. I bet elephants get together to make fun of how large your ears are. Sokka shouted, that's it. You're going down. When Sakura screamed, I'll show you who's boss, earth bending style. Sasuke tapped Naruto on the head to make sure he would remember what to do. He then sent an air current through the vent, causing the boulder to suddenly rise into the air, with Momo holding his arms in the air on the other side. According to one of the Fire Nation soldiers, that lemur, he's earth bending. It's the girl. No, you fool, Sokka exclaimed. Oh, of course, the Fire Nation soldier exclaimed, begin to flush with shame. Sokka whispered into Sakura's ear, you have 12 hours to find Haru, and we'll be right behind you, before grabbing her by the shoulders and letting the boulder fall to the ground. When the Fire Nation soldiers Sokka and Sakura turned to face the source of the voice, they saw Katara standing there and exclaiming, hold it, release my fellow earth bender right now. When she turned around, she saw another Fire Nation soldier asking, you're an earth bender too? From behind her. Kurama no Kyuubi. In reality, Kakashi is merely employing a henge. Then, as Sokka tugged at his ears a bit and turned to face Momo, who was standing on Naruto's shoulder, the 4 Fire Nation soldiers removed Sakura and Katara. The Water Tribe warrior exclaimed, Momo, you have some big ears, and Momo's ears fell. After being taken to a port, Sakura and Katara boarded a ship to sail to wherever Haru might be. Subsequently, Naruto, Aang, Sasuke, Sokka, and Momo followed the ship on Appa until it arrived at a prison rig composed entirely of metal. Sokka tried to reassure Aang and Naruto before Appa took off. They'll be fine. I'm sure they know what they're doing, she said. The prison rig as he approached the group of earth benders, Sakura, and Katara, a man said, earth benders. It is my pleasure to welcome you aboard my modest shipyard. I am your warden. I prefer to think of you, not as prisoners, but as honored guests. And I hope you will come to think of me as your humble and caring host. You will succeed here if you simply abide. He was interrupted by an elderly man coughing, and he quickly spun around, thrust his left arm forward, and threw a wave of fire at the old man's feet, which the man jumped back to avoid it. Before a soldier escorted the elderly man away, the warden yelled, what kind of guests dishonor his host by interrupting him? Take him below. 1 week in solitary will improve his manners. Sakura thought, how cruel, but then her inner voice said, Shaw, let me at him, I'm gonna kill that guy. The warden stood in front of Katara and looked down on her, saying, just treat me with the courtesy I give you, and we'll get along famously. As he led the inmates to the area where all the other inmates were being held, the warden remarked, you will notice, earth benders, that this rig is made entirely of metal. You are miles away from any rock or earth. So if you have any illusions about employing that brute savagery that passes for bending among you people, forget them. It is impossible. Good day. The warden then left as the inmates were led to the other inmates' quarters. Sakura turned to face Kakashi, who was still posing as a Fire Nation soldier, as they entered, and after making eye contact, they had a quiet conversation before the doors leading to the inmates' quarters were lowered. Because there were so many people there, Sakura and Katara had a difficult time finding Haru as they made their way through the crowd. Katara-san. Sakura-san. They turned to face Haru when they heard the familiar voice. Haru-san. Exclaimed Katara as she rushed to embrace the boy. Haru questioned, "What are you two doing here?" "It's my fault, you were captured. We came to rescue you," Katara replied. Haru questioned, "So you got yourselves arrested?" Sakura stated, "It was the only way to find you." Before guiding the two girls away, Haru remarked, "You've got guts, Katara-san. Sakura-san. I'll give you that. Come on, there's someone I want you to meet." Alongside Kakashi saw a number of crates that appeared to be filled with coal after passing through some hallways deep within the rig. Miles away from any earth or rock, As he held up a piece of coal, Kakashi thought, "Earth. Benders should still be able to bend it because coal is essentially the same as earth." After that, he left an explosive tag on the wall and walked away, dropping the coal back into the crate. Alongside Haru, Katara, and Sakura when Haru brought them to meet his father, he said, "Dad, this is Katara-san and Sakura-san. This is my father, Tyro." As she and Sakura bowed, Katara remarked, "It's an honor to meet you." As he offered them 2 bowls, Tyro said, "Have some dinner Katara-san, Sakura-san." They each took 1 bowl, but neither of them liked the food's appearance, saying, "It's not as bad as it looks." Katara and Sakura then sat down, and Sakura tried some, but she didn't like it at all, saying, "It's still pretty bad though." A man came up to them and said, "Tyro-san, the prisoners are complaining there aren't enough blankets to go around. I'll talk to the guards. In the meantime, make sure the elderly are taken care of. The rest of us will simply have to hope for warmer weather," Tyro replied. Sakura inquired, "So, what's the escape plan?" Tyro said, "Excuse me?" "You know, the plan to get everyone off the rig. What is it? Mutiny, sabotage?" Sakura asked. The plan is to survive. Wait out this war. Hope that one day some of us can get back to home and forget this ever happened," Tyro replied. "How can you say that? You sound like you've already given up," Katara replied. Katara-san. Sakura-san. I admire your courage, and I envy your youth, but people's lives are at stake here. The warden is a ruthless man, and he won't stand for any rebellion. I'm sorry, but we're powerless, Tyro replied. Katara got up and climbed up on a table, then picked up the lid of a pan and hit it a few times with a spoon to draw the earth. Bender's attention. We'll see about that. Earth. Benders, you don't know me, but I know of you. Every child in my water tribe village was brought to sleep with stories of the brave Earth Kingdom and the courageous Earth Benders who guard its borders. Some of you may think that the Fire Nation has made you powerless. Yes, they have taken away your ability to bend, but they can't take away your courage. And it is your courage they should truly fear, because it runs deeper than any mine you've been forced to dig, any ocean that keeps you far from home. It is the strength of your hearts that make you who you are, hearts that will remain unbroken when all rock and stone has eroded away. The time to fight back is now. I can tell you the Avatar has returned, so remember your courage, Earth Benders. Let us fight for our freedom, she replied, but the Earth Benders simply what they were doing before as spoke anything as the warden walked off, beaming. Later that evening, before making their way back to where Sasuke, Appa, and Momo were waiting to see that Kakashi, who had dropped the henge, had also arrived, Aang and Naruto sneaked onto the rig and woke up Katara and Sakura. Then Aang jumped on Appa, saying, "Your 12 hours are up. Where's Haru-san? We've got to get out of here." "We can't," exclaimed Katara. Sitting at the reins, Sasuke remarked, "We don't have much time, there are guards everywhere." Aang said, "Katara-chan, Sakura-san, what's wrong?" Sakura declared, "We're not leaving." Naruto asked, "Sakura-chan, are you crazy?" They won't go, no matter what any of you say. They don't want to abandon the Earth. Benders. Kakashi replied, and everyone was staring at him. I expected as much, and that's why I've placed explosive tags all over this rig. Hey. I was hoping we could get some action here. I haven't been in a battle since Kyoshi Island, Sasuke replied. Sokka asked, what? Not you too? Naruto said. Come on Sokka-san, don't be such a wimp. A reluctant Sokka followed Sasuke and Aang in climbing onto the rig. Before they were nearly struck by a spotlight, he muttered in defeat, fine. Aang whispered something into Appa's ear before the big bison fled and Momo flew to Naruto, and Kakashi said, we should find someplace to hide. However, to fire. Nation soldiers noticed the sky. Bison as they passed shortly after the group had fled. Look, exclaimed one of them, alongside the warden. The warden turned to face the two who had spotted Appa and said, tell me exactly what you saw. One of them remarked, well, sir, it looked like a flying bison. What? Inquired the warden. The other soldier said, it was a giant flying buffalo, sir, with an empty saddle. The warden inquired, which was it, a buffalo or a bison? One of the soldiers remarked, I'm not sure what the difference is, but that's not really the point, is it, sir? Before hurling the soldier into the water, the warden exclaimed, I'll decide what the point is, fool, and then turned to face the other soldier. The warden said, you, wake up the captain, search the entire rig, and turn to leave. The soldier said, sir. The warden stopped walking and asked, what? The soldier said, that was the captain you just threw overboard, so. Then wake up someone I haven't thrown overboard, and search the rig. There's something going on here and I don't like it, the captain replied. Alongside the group. We don't have much time. What are we gonna do? Sokka replied. The others stared at Aang in disbelief as he exclaimed, I wish I knew how to make a hurricane. The warden would run away, and we'd steal his keys. After giving Aang a head injury, Naruto questioned, you really think he'd let his keys stay behind? Aang stated, I'm just tossing ideas around. Katara-san tried talking the earth. Benders into fighting back, but it didn't work. Sakura replied. If there were just a way to help them help themselves, Katara replied. Maybe they'd change their minds if we'd present some kind of earth for them, said Kakashi. But Kakashi. Sensei, you heard the warden, didn't you? This entire place is made of metal, Sakura responded. When snoozing around earlier, I found several crates filled with coal, they could use that for bending instead, Kakashi replied. Afterwards Katara, Sokka, Sakura, and Sasuke were at an air vent in the center of the prisoners' quarters when she said, it's almost dawn, we're running out of time. You sure this is gonna work? It should. These vents reminded me of our little trick back at the village. We're gonna do the same thing, but on a much bigger scale. There's a huge deposit of coal at the base of this island, and the whole system is ventilated. Aang-san and Naruto-san closed off all the vents except one, when they do their air bending. The coal only has one place to go. Right back here, Sokka clarified. There's the intruders. The four of them then realized that the prisoners were standing there, and that fire nation soldiers were all around them. With his boomerang in hand, Sokka screamed, stand back, I'm warning you. Katara-san, Sakura-san, stop. You can't win this fight, Tyro screamed. As he arrived, the warden exclaimed, listen to him well, children. You're one mistake away from dying where you stand. Aang, Naruto, and Momo appeared before the coal abruptly flew out of the vent and fell in front of the earth. Benders. The two avatars then landed on the coal, while Momo landed on Naruto's shoulder. Katara exclaimed, here's your chance, Earth Benders. Before grabbing a piece of coal and saying, take it. Your fate is in your own hands. Haru was about to advance when his father intervened, and a few of the other Earth Benders retreated, and the warden chuckled. They're a waste of your energy, little girl. You failed, he said before turning to go, but one of the soldiers blocked his way. Move aside, he said. Foolish girl. You thought a few inspirational words and some coal would chance these people? Look at these blank, hopeless faces. Their spirits were broken a long time ago. Ooh. But you still believe in them, how sweet. I don't think so, added the soldier, grinning. Before there was a puff of smoke and Kakashi dropped his henge, the warden questioned, "What?" Before the warden turned to face him, Naruto exclaimed, "Earth Benders. This is your chance to fight for your freedom. With all of us working together, the Fire Nation soldiers won't stand a chance." "It's no use, boy. They'll never." However, he was interrupted when a stone struck his forehead, and he turned to see Haru where it had come from. He then threw a wave of fire at the boy, but a wall of coal erupted to shield him, and when he turned around, he saw that his father had done so. Before he and a number of other Fire Nation soldiers launched waves of fire at the Earth Benders, the warden yelled, "Show no mercy." Tyro, Haru, and 2 other Earth Benders then put up a wall of coil to put out the fire. Tyro shouted, "For the Earth Kingdom, attack!" and hurled the coil to the ground, launching numerous stones in the direction of the Fire Benders. After a series of hand signals, Kakashi said, "Sweden. Suiryuden no Jutsu." Suddenly, a water dragon emerged from the ocean and rained down on a number of Fire Nation soldiers. As he launched a fireball directly at a fire bender, who then protected himself with a wall of fire, Sasuke yelled, "Kaden Gukakyo no Jutsu." However, Sasuke approached him and stabbed him with a kunai as the fire subsided. Momo caught the spear after Sokka ran over to one of the Fire Nation soldiers, cut it with his boomerang, and threw it into the air. They also did this to a number of other Fire Nation soldiers. A fire bender threw a fireball at her from behind after Sakura threw a shuriken at a Fire Nation soldier's neck, but Katara arrived behind her and used water to put out the fire. "You should be a little more careful there, Sakura-san," she stated. Before Sakura bent some water out of her water pouch and hurled it at another fire bender as Katara pulled out the first, she said, "You don't have to worry about me, Katara-san, I'll be fine." Before avoiding a fireball and sending the fire bender who threw it hard against a wall, Naruto launched a wave of air at a few Fire Nation soldiers, sending them into the ocean. In order to create an escape route, Tyro and Haru bent a significant amount of coal into the air, formed it into a ball, brought it down between them, compressed it into a single rock, and threw it directly at the door. Tyro shouted, "Get to the ship. We'll hold them off," and then everyone began to rush toward the ship. With a shout, "Do not let them escape," the warden and a few other Fire benders chased after them with waves of fire. After stopping his run, Aang used air bending to create a small air tunnel between his arms and up his back. Then, he exclaimed, "Guys, throw me some coal." Sokka, Katara, and Sakura placed coal on top of the air tunnel behind Aang's head, and the fire benders were knocked down by the small stones they threw at it. The coal the fire benders were now lying on was then moved toward one another by Tyro, Haru, and another Earth bender, forming a platform on which the Fire benders stood before it was moved over the ocean. The warden said, "No, please. I can't swim," Tyro said, "Don't worry, I hear cowards float," and then put them in the water below. Afterwards, as Appa was swimming in the water beside the lead ship, which contained Tyro, Haru, Katara, Naruto, and Kakashi, the Earth benders had captured the 3 Fire Nation ships that were present and were now at last leaving the prison rig. "I want to thank you for saving me, for saving us," Haru replied. Katara scratched the back of her head and said, "All it took was a little coal." "It wasn't the coal, Katara-san, it was you," Haru replied. "Thank you for helping me find my courage, Katara-san of the water tribe and Naruto-san of Konoha. My family, and everyone here owes you much," Tyro replied. Kurama no Kyuubi. In case you were wondering, Tyro was aware of Konoha from Naruto. Katara remarked, "So, I guess you're going home now." Tyro exclaimed, "Yes, to take back my village," before shouting, "To take back all of our villages. The Fire Nation will regret the day they set foot on our land," to the rest of the group. Before making a hand gesture, Kakashi exclaimed, "Well, then. Let's celebrate your new rebellion by destroying that rig." The crowd cheered as the rig exploded. "Come with us," exclaimed Haru. "I can't. Your mission is to take back your home, ours is to get Aang-kun and Naruto-san to the north. Pull," Katara replied. "Naruto-san," exclaimed Tyro. As if the people of this era had not yet begun to use Japanese. Aside from the honorifics, Naruto corrected himself. Hi. I mean, yes? Tyro handed Naruto a scroll and said, take this scroll. It's an earth bending scroll containing techniques that I, myself invented. Naruto exclaimed, thanks, while examining the scroll he was holding. Before Naruto thanked him once more and leapt over to Appa to show the scroll to Aang, Kakashi followed. Tyro said, but don't get too excited about it yet. I've heard that it's especially difficult for an avatar to learn the element that's the opposite of their own, and earth is the opposite of air. It might be best for you to find an earth bending teacher before learning any of these techniques. Katara.san. Thank you for bringing my father back to me. I never thought I'd see him again. I only wish there was some way, Haru replied. When Katara put her hand to her neck, she realized that her mother's necklace was about to fall off. I know, she said. My mother's necklace, it's gone. The rig's remnants. Katara's necklace was lying on a small piece of the rig that was floating on the water when it was abruptly picked up by Prince Zuko herself. As the group soared above cloud level on Appa, the day was quiet and uneventful. As Katara lay in the saddle and gazed down at the clouds, she remarked, those clouds look soft, don't they? Like you could just jump down and you'd land on a big soft cottony heap. When Sokka said, maybe you should give it a try, Katara remarked, you're hilarious. As Katara, Sokka, Sakura, Sasuke, and Naruto, who was at the reins, took care of him, Aang woke up and exclaimed, I'll try it, before grabbing his glider and leaping out of the saddle and down towards the clouds. Aang went straight through a cloud, returned on the opposite side of Appa, and landed in the saddle, drenched, after Naruto said, I've really got to get myself one of those gliders. Prior to air bending himself dry, he stated, turns out clouds are made of water. Well, then maybe Sakura Chan and Katara.san can learn some cloud bending, said Naruto. Sakura turned to face her blonde teammate and exclaimed, very funny, Naruto. But then she caught sight of something far away and asked, hey, what is that? As everyone turned to face Sakura, they noticed that a significant portion of the forest beneath them had burned, giving the impression that the area was severely scarred. Sokka remarked, it's like a scar. They soon discovered that the forest had burned down when they landed on the area where the scar was. Listen, it's so quiet, there's no life anywhere, Sokka replied. Katara glanced at the bald avatar and said, Aang.kun, are you okay? Fire Nation! Exclaimed Kakashi, looking at the footprints. Sakura hushed Naruto before pointing at Aang, who appeared to be quite depressed. Those evil savages make me sick, they have no respect for, Naruto began. Why would anyone do this? How could I let this happen? Aang replied. Aang.kun, you didn't let this happen, it has nothing to do with you, Katara replied. Yes, it does. It's the Avatar's job to protect nature, but I don't know how to do my job, Aang replied. Hey, I don't know how to do it either, but isn't that why we're going to the North Pole? Replied Naruto. That's right, we're going there to find you too a teacher, Sakura replied. Yeah, a water bending teacher, but there's no one who could teach me how to be the Avatar. Monk Gyatso Sensei said that Avatar Roku would help me, Aang replied. The Avatar that came before you? He died over 100 years ago, how are you supposed to talk to him? Sokka responded. Aang uttered, I don't know. Hot springs close to Zuko's vessel. Zuko shouted as he made his way to a group of hot springs, Uncle, it's time to leave. Where are you, Uncle Iroh? Perched in a hot spring, Iroh exclaimed, over here. Uncle, we need to move on, we're closing in on the Avatar's trail, and I don't want to lose them, replied Zuko. You look tired, Prince Zuko. Why don't you join me in these hot springs and soak away your troubles? Iroh replied. My troubles cannot be soaked away, it's time to go, said Zuko. Iroh put his hands together, his left clenched into a fist, and then he sent hot air out of his nose to further heat the water. You should take your teacher's advice and relax a little. The temperature's just right, I heated it myself. Enough. We need to leave now. Get out of the water, said Zuko. Iroh stood up and said, very well. Zuko closed his eyes and held his right arm in front of his eyes. He walked away, and Iroh sat down again to rest. On second thought, why don't you take another few minutes? But be back at the ship in half an hour or I'm leaving without you, he said. Alongside the group, Sakura approached Aang and said, Hey, Aang-san. Are you ready to be cheered up? Before Sakura threw an acorn at him, Aang said, No, ow. Hey, how is that cheering me up? She asked. Before Sakura threw an acorn at him, Sokka exclaimed, It cheered me up. Yeah, I probably deserved that. These acorns are everywhere, Aang-san. That means the forest will grow back. Every one of these will be a tall oak tree someday, and all the birds and animals that lived here will come back. Sakura said as she handed the acorn to Aang. Aang said, Thanks, Sakura-san. Sakura grinned before noticing an elderly man approaching them. Who are you? Inquired Naruto. But those markings. Are you the Avatar, child? The man said, approaching Aang, when I saw the sky. Bison, I thought it was impossible. After that, Aang turns to face Kakashi, who nods before turning to face the elderly man. The old man said, My village is in dire need of your assistance. Village of Senlin. Upon entering the village, the group observed that a few of the houses were damaged, with one in particular being almost entirely destroyed. Once they were inside the village hall, the old man pointed to Aang and said, This young person is the Avatar. As he walked up to the group, the village leader said, So the rumors of your return are true. He then bowed before saying, It is the greatest honor of a lifetime to be in your presence, Avatar. Nice to meet you too. So, is there something I can help you with? Aang responded. The head of the village said, I'm not sure. Before turning to face the group, the elderly man stated, Our village is in crisis. He's our only hope. For the last few days at sunset, a spirit monster comes and attacks our village. He is Heibai, the black and white spirit. Sakura looked up at her sensei and said, Hey, Kakashi. Sensei. What's a spirit? Before he began to think, Kakashi remarked, Well, Sakura. A spirit is he was unsure of the answer. Sakura, Sasuke, and Kakashi gazed at Naruto as he explained, A spirit is a non-physical entity that usually resides in the spirit world. What? They asked. Sakura questioned, How do you know that, Naruto? Naruto remarked, I don't know, it just sorta came to me. He must be the Avatar, Sasuke reasoned. Obviously, Sakura pondered. Sokka questioned, So, why is it attacking you? We do not know. But each of the last 3 nights, he has abducted one of our own. We are especially fearful because the winter solstice draws near. The head of the village replied. Kakashi inquired, What happens at the solstice? As the solstice approaches, the natural world and the spirit world grow closer and closer until the line between them is blurred completely. The elderly gentleman replied. Heibai is already causing devastation and destruction. Once the solstice is here, there is no telling what will happen, said the village leader. Aang said, So, what do you want me to do exactly? Who better to resolve a crisis between our world and the spirit world than the Avatar himself? You are the great bridge between man and spirits. The elderly gentleman replied. Aang said, Right, that's me.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.